opportunity to speak in debate, and that all members have the ability to vote. It is the expectation that members will communicate respectfully and consider the opinions of others. No member should speak without first being recognized by the chair, with only a few allowable exceptions for interruption. It is incumbent upon each member to familiarize themselves with Robert's rules and make inquiry of the chair if they have any questions. With regard to decorum in meetings, members of the board are reminded of the following. The chair may interrupt a speaker if decorum is not being observed. Alternatively, a member may declare a point of order to interrupt a speaker and, after being recognized by the chair, bring attention to another member who is failing to observe decorum. The chair then directs the member to come into compliance. If a member fails to come into compliance, the chair shall take back control of the floor and continue the proceedings. That's Robert's Rules of Order. We're all now up to date and on the same page with those. And with that, I am very excited to move on to West Lafayette Elementary School, Good Citizenship Club, and Courage. Mrs. Delaney, is that you tonight? All right, wonderful.
On this end, and then third grade's gonna come all the way down this way. Mabel, come on up. We're just gonna get organized. Remember, you just have to smile and wave. Well, I'm gonna help you.
Parents, please feel free to move however you'd like to take pictures. That's just fine. For those of you who do not know already, our administrators here presenting from the elementary school tonight, Mrs. Sarah Delaney there in the black and white jacket, and Mrs. Rhonda Laney, the assistant principal.
Okay. Smile.
Do you want the microphone? You can.
Yeah, do that. It's recording. Might be a good idea.
Okay.
You got a long cord. You can really walk.
Great. I told them to smile and wave. They're doing a great job. So each month we celebrate different life skills within our classrooms. This past month of November, we focused on the life skill of courage. So these students were all nominated by their teachers and got to have a special lunch with me. We had lots of prizes. I think some people said it was the best day ever. I don't know. So we got to have a sampling of some of our students. We have 2 from each grade level. Typically, it's 1 or 2 students from each class. So I could have brought, I think we had like 40 kids. So we'll start with just these 8. First, we have Mabel. This is Mabel McCullough. She's in Mrs. Talukian's kindergarten room. And Mrs. Talukian says, starting school, speaking up in a busy classroom, and becoming independent can take a lot of courage. Mabel has shown so much courage and growth in our classroom by showing up every day and giving her best effort. I know it hasn't always been easy, but the results are evident of Mabel's courage. I am so proud of her. So, congratulations. Next up, we have Damari Allman, and we also have his sister at the end, so we have a very proud family tonight. Damari and he's in Miss Corsi's kindergarten class. Damari is an ideal representation of a courageous kindergartner. He is always willing to try new things, answer questions, and give his best effort. It takes a lot of courage to raise your hand and stand out. Damari is tiny and mighty. He works hard every day and has the courage to try new things. I'm so proud of Damari, and I'm lucky he is part of our classroom family. Congratulations, Damari. This is Henrik Stoker, and Henrik exemplifies courage in the classroom. He is kind-hearted and sensitive to others' needs and emotions. Henrik has shown courage this year by being quick to apologize if he has done something to upset someone, owning his mistakes, and coming up with practical and reasonable ways to move forward. Henrik is an outstanding example of not only courage, but of kindness, friendship, and responsibility as well. He is amazing, and I am so proud of him, and that was from Mrs. Schindley, his classroom teacher. So congratulations. We may have to shift down, I don't know. Next, we have Miss Aurora Cabral, and she is from Miss Gould's first grade class, but she was nominated by Mrs. Audie. Aurora is a pleasure to have in class. She is kind to her peers and shows through her thoughtful actions that she cares about others. During learning activities, Aurora always demonstrates courage when working with new material. She approaches every situation with enthusiasm and a smile, and her passion is contagious. Aurora strives to do her best and takes pride in doing good work. We are all so proud of you, Aurora. Way to go. Congratulations, Aurora. Next, we have Austin Morris. He is a second grader in Mrs. Cronander's class, and she has this to say. I have the absolute pleasure of having Austin Morris as part of my second grade classroom community. Austin is a gentle and kind individual who began his journey at WLES this year. With drastic changes in school structure and a new environment, Austin faced this new school year with courage and perseverance. He displayed courage when feeling overwhelmed or anxious when trying something new, and understood that myself and any other WLES staff member would be there if he needed us. His sweet sense of humor, humility, and teamwork skills exemplify Red Devil pride. Congratulations, Austin. Next, we have Jane Hoffman from Mrs. Peters' class in second grade. Jane is an advocate for all. They're constantly writing and sharing about different perspectives and how we can assist as a society. They are courageous in their sense of self and making sure that their own boundaries and those of others are respected. I applaud Jane's dedication to being a courageous upstander. Congratulations, Jane. And we have Serenity Allman, sister of Damari. This is Serenity's, third grade in Mrs. Smart's class, and Mrs. Smart shares, this is Serenity's first year with WLES. She didn't know one person. You could visibly see her nerves, but each day she showed up and pushed herself. Even when times were a little uncomfortable, she still persevered with true courage across environments. She is a very creative, artistic artist and a great friend to all. We are lucky to have Serenity. Congratulations, Serenity. And last is my name twin. She spells her name the same way I do. No H. This is Sarah G., third grade from Mr. Brantley's class. Mr. Brantley writes, Sarah is a wonderful student. She is one of those rare students who truly cares about her schoolwork and takes the chances necessary to be successful. Sarah overcomes nerves and uncertainty daily and shows her academic strengths. She is a creative and talented student. I feel lucky to have her in class this year. Congratulations, Sarah. So a little round of applause for our courageous students, and thank you. We'll take a couple pictures.
Parents, you are welcome to continue and stay. It's also okay if you would like to check out of our meeting at this point and go about your evening. You're welcome to do so now. While we're doing that, if I could bring forward the 2023 Regional Spelling Bee winner, also being recognized here tonight.
I'm going to stand as well. My name is Amy Wood. I am the CEO at Laura Educational Opportunities. Many of you might not realize that Laura was the original person who ran the regional spelling bee many years ago with Joanne Vorse. When Joanne retired, that switched over to another program that she runs, which was Adult Learners, Inc. And one of the things that she wanted to have is to have it back with Laura. So we're really excited that we had our first year of doing the spelling bee once again. But it's something that wasn't a new adventure necessarily for Sharanya. So right now, we have all the schools signing up. They are going to run their individual spelling bees, and they are going to send them then to us on March 2nd, where we will have the regional spelling bee. And that is our major sponsor on that one is Purdue University. And whoever wins that will go on to Washington, D.C. to compete in the National Spelling Bee. So normally this would come a little sooner, but being new to it this year, it took us a little longer, but that's okay. We're ready to do that tonight. So I'm just going to say, we get to have a spelling bee plaque that will have Sharanya Carr's name on it that will stay at the school for a while. Then we will pick this plaque up and it'll go on for the next one. So that one will stay here. But what we always also wanted to make sure for all the hard work that, all the hard work that Sharanya did, she gets her own plaque. And I want to say she was very, very courageous to enter into the spelling bee. And she was a professional through it all. She was a delight to be able to watch and see her win. What round did you go to in the national? She got to the 4th round at the National Spelling Bee. We're very, very excited that she was able to go through that experience. She's already been studying and doing everything she needs to do for this year coming up in March, where she hopes to be back to the regional and she hopes to win that. So we're excited to see what's going to happen. Come March, see if she's coming back with us and if she ends up winning again. But we wanted to say congratulations. You did a job well done, and we're very proud of you.
That's fine. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Wanted to do that, but I'm allergic to bees.
Oh, is that it? All right, so we are going to move on now to our third item, which is that is my privilege to take this opportunity to thank Mr. John Dennis, a 1977 West Lafayette graduating and our outgoing West Lafayette City Mayor, for his leadership and service to the community. After graduating from West Lafayette, Mr. Dennis received his bachelor's in safety engineering and a master's in criminology from Indiana State University. He then joined the Lafayette Police Department, where he finished his 23 years of service as deputy chief. Mr. Dennis was elected mayor of West Lafayette in 2007 and has served 4 terms. His work speaks volume about his unwavering positivity, integrity, and dedication. We extend our heartfelt appreciation to Mayor Dennis and wish him much success and happiness in his future endeavors. He was recognized, of course, last spring on our Wall of Pride, and was a great moment of celebration at that time, but we felt it was really appropriate here on the last meeting we have before his official retirement to acknowledge him in some form or fashion, and so that I appreciate you all allowing that on our agenda tonight. So we're going to move forward to communication from the audience. We have one member, David Kuchik. I always pronounce it wrong. Is it Kusik? Did I have, oh, right. Well, please come forward.
Kusick.
Kusick. However, right? All right. So just a reminder, everyone who comes and speaks to us has 3 minutes. And so Mrs. Austin will keep the time and we'll wave you down if you exceed that number.
I've tried to time this. I'm a slow reader. I've got 3 pages.
Okay.
They're big print, so I think we can probably do this.
Thank you.
My name is Dave Kusick, and I reside at 807 Elmwood Drive, West Lafayette. My comments tonight are directed to the members of the West Lafayette School Board, collectively and individually. As a tax-paying resident and parent of a high school student, current high school student, I implore each of you to change your behavior and actions in preparation for and during West Lafayette School Board meetings. I have 3 points. First and foremost, this board needs to work to achieve consensus on all issues. Unanimous board votes would reassure parents and residents that the board has vetted each issue fully. A split vote, especially ones that are 4-3, raises a perplexing question. Was the split vote the best decision for our school district and the education of our kids? Perhaps 4-3 votes show neither side had the better option. Was there another solution that would have been the best solution? A 4-3 board that votes consistently in blocks is very comparable to our U.S. Congress, which has a very low public confidence rating. Our U.S. Congress progressively proves itself to be dysfunctional. I'm sure this is not the goal of this board. Second, this board's conduct during meetings coupled with 4-3 votes puts in jeopardy hiring and sustaining top teachers, administrators, principals, and superintendents. I'm guessing that every prospective principal candidate for our soon-to-be principal vacancy will observe at least one school board meeting. And I'd like to ask you, would any highly qualified prospective principal candidate want to work in a school system with such a contentious board? In my opinion, the board needs to work to have more work sessions to achieve a consensus focused on achieving unanimous or near unanimous board decisions prior to school board meetings. But first, I think the board needs therapy work sessions to figure out how to interact professionally where focus remains on the issue, not the past or current individual differences, while finding consensus. Third, this board needs to be the example for how our superintendent, administrators, principals, and teachers are expected to interact to find the best resolves while educating our students. As an example, last month's agenda item 14, the school district's policy vendor decision is emblematic of how not to govern. That issue was not an urgent issue needing immediate action. There was no reason to push this agenda item to a vote, as the school had been operating successfully for years with the existing vendor. And the school system could operate into the future until consensus was achieved.
Mr. Kusick, I'm sorry.
Additionally, the public bantering between board members was not professional.
Mr.
naturally-
Kusick, I'm really sorry your 3 minutes are up. I'm very sorry. Would you like to just wrap up in a couple words? I appreciate your comments here
Yeah,
tonight.
I've got them. It's just a few more words.
Okay.
Naturally, educating yourself on every issue is required, but taking the next step is also required. Fostering a willingness to find common understanding among yourselves to yield unanimous board decisions. Any other conduct is not productive, professional, or acceptable. In my opinion, the school board must now govern through consensus, resulting in unanimous or near unanimous board votes. If you cannot commit to working towards governing through consensus, then in my opinion, you individually have only one option. Your individual differences do not matter in our governance of our school district. Your critical thinking, your logical approach to achieve consensus, as well as your passion for the education of our students do matter. Choose to do the right thing, embrace the change, govern unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kusick. All right, we're going to move on to Section 3, routine business, approval of the agenda for the December 11th regular meeting of the Board of School Trustees. I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Schott, second by Mrs. Austin. Any changes that you would like to see on this agenda? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of approving tonight's agenda, please indicate with a show of hands. That motion carries 7-0, Mrs. Julian. Moving on to item 2, approval of the minutes of the November 13th regular board meeting of School of Trustees. Entertain a motion. Moved by Mrs. Austin.
Second.
Second by Mr. Schott. Questions, comments, changes? Okay, hearing none. All of those, I'm sorry, Mrs. Mumford?
I just would like to make a comment that I'm going to oppose the minutes, as I've shared at past meetings that the public access counselor has says that our minutes saying discussion ensued is not sufficient. Yet we've continued to do it, so that's why I will be opposing these minutes.
Okay. Anybody else? Any questions, changes? Okay. All of those in favor of approving tonight's minutes indicate with a show of hands. Please note that Mr. Schott, Mrs. Austin, Mr. Marley, and I may be out of order on this, and I also vote to approve all of those opposed to the minutes. Mrs. Mumford? Okay, all of those who abstain from the minutes? Dr. Yin and Mr. Wong, did you want to vote any, or not vote or abstain? What's your? Correct. Okay, so we have to throw that last vote away. So we have to start over again. Every member, I'm going to call for a vote. We've closed discussion. I'm going to call for a vote. We have to indicate with a show of hands. All of those in favor of approving tonight's minutes as submitted, please indicate with a show of hands. Okay. Mr. Marley, Mr. Schott, Mrs. Austin, and myself vote in the affirmative. All of those who oppose approving tonight's minutes, please indicate with a show of hands. No, she just stated her position. There was no change recommended. Okay, so all of those opposed. Mr. Wong and Mrs. Mumford oppose the approval of the minutes. Dr. Yin, do you abstain? Okay. Moving on to number 3, approval of the minutes from the November 30th executive session of the Board of Trustees. I could entertain a motion, please. Moved by Mrs. Mumford. Second by Mr. Wong. Any comments or questions about those? Okay, hearing none. All of those in favor of approving the minutes of the executive session of November 30th indicate with a show of hands. That motion carries 7-0, Mrs. Julian. We're going to move on to this next item. It's unfinished business. Last month we had some different individuals speak with us about a cell tower proposal. I think that in general, I did not hear from any member who was interested in entertaining that. I'm just going to open it up for some discussion. We need to give the vendor and our community some decision on this. So really what we just need to talk about tonight and take a vote on tonight is if we want to proceed with any kind of conversation with this T-Mobile vendor regarding the cell phone tower recommendation. So by proceed, that means proceed to investigate more. Doesn't mean to build it. It just means to proceed to investigate it further and hear from our community and go pursue it as an opportunity or not. Mrs. Austin.
I move that we not pursue it as an opportunity.
Okay, so it's not an either or scenario. We have to pick. So really the motion tonight is to vote to proceed and further investigate it. And so everyone can vote for or against that item to proceed. So again, we're not voting to build it. We're voting to investigate it further based on all of the information that we were provided both from the vendor and the community member regarding this issue. So I need a motion. I need somebody to move that and second that so that we can take that vote?
You can submit.
Moved by Mrs. Austin, second by Mr. Wong. Does anybody want to say anything before we move into that vote? Dr. Yin? Did you? Do you have any reasons you want to share with the rest of the board about your opinion?
So at the last meeting, parents shared a lot of their concerns. And also when we talked about this 2 years ago, we also said no to the same proposal. I mean, similar proposal. I don't see a reason to proceed it. And I don't think it should be possible, no matter what we found. So, and there are potential health concerns, plus it will take a lot of our space, and it's dangerous for kids to play around and not talk about the radiation, even the equipment itself and we don't have a lot of space there for kids to running around. I don't think we should give up the big piece of land for
Thank you. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to say about the matter? Mrs.
I have a
Mumford?
question. Have you heard much from the community since that presentation, either for or against?
We've not heard much for.
Not much yet. Okay, which is fine. I mean, I know we weren't seeking it yet, but thank you.
Anybody, any other comments or questions about this? Mrs. Austin?
I agree with Dr. Yan. I don't think we should pursue it.
Did you have any reasons that you wanted to share for that?
I don't think they're offering enough money for the space that they propose to take over. And I don't think the community support is going to be there.
Okay.
Based on my experience 2 years ago.
Okay. Anybody else? Any comments that you want to make? Anyone who's not spoken yet? Okay. All right, if we feel comfortable taking this to a vote, all of those in favor, and again, this is a vote to proceed with getting more information from our community and the vendor. All of those in favor of taking that next step, please indicate with a show of hands. Okay, 0 votes in the affirmative. All of those opposed, please indicate with a show of hands. Okay, all members, that's a 7 no vote. And so with that, that motion fails. We will not move ahead. And if you would please notify the vendor and also the community member as well. All right, thank you. Moving forward to item number 4, bullying. And we have, I believe, various principals here tonight to make this presentation for us. I'm a little bit disturbed that you're not sitting in order, just so you know. I'm sorry. Thank you so much. I feel my universe is in order now. Okay.
I don't think I can go.
Ron was wanting the middle. I'm happy to give it to him. I'm Margaret Saros, the principal, as you guys know, for the intermediate school. And
Sarah Delaney, principal at the elementary.
And I'm Ron Schreiner, principal for the junior senior high school.
we have been tasked to work together to work on presenting to you more about bullying. And here, I'm going to give this to you because I think that's going to be a lot. I think you have to put that. There you go. There is Indiana code does lay this out for us pretty easily. So it is nice because we can follow along exactly with what Indiana is expecting of us. We also, though, have our handbooks that are aligned with that and our policy that goes along with that too. So we have the expectations and the requirements in all those places so that students and parents and school board and community and the state can all follow the same expectations for bullying.
The next slide is something that we wanted to make sure that we shared with all of you. This is the nuts and bolts of what we're sharing with our students and with our staff, the difference between bullying and conflict. A lot of times we're approached by staff members, by parents, by children, especially kids running in from lunch recess. He's bullying me. So we start looking at the definitions of conflict and bullying and how those are different. Bullying, like we just shared, does have a legal definition. So I just want to share these very quickly. So conflict is a disagreement or an argument where both sides are kind of equally balanced in power. They're both arguing the same amount. There's equal power. One is not more, is not stronger or even older, larger than the other one. And conflict generally stops when it's kind of called out or when someone understands that they're hurting someone else. Bullying is a little bit more aggressive. The goal in bullying is to hurt, harm, or humiliate. The person bullying has more power. That could be size, that could be like their social stature, or sometimes it's their, I don't even know the exact word, but just like their social status. They have more friends, they've got a bigger circle. They continue the behavior when they realize it's hurting someone. Sometimes that even amps up the behavior. So those are kind of the two differences that we look at when we are meeting with students and figuring out if we have a conflict situation or a bullying situation.
Indiana code also requires us to put an education piece to this. And by October 15th of each year, we are required legally to educate about bullying in our classrooms or in our building in general. We approach this a little in different ways as far as how we do that, but we have a component that is much more aligned to our population and our age groups that we all have. As I mentioned earlier, in the handbooks, it's found, and that's K through 12. We also have teachers reinforcing this in their classrooms at recess. Our lunchroom supervisors included in that, and that's K through 12. As far as disciplinary decisions to prevent future issues, that's again K through 12. Guidance lessons we do have in the K through 6 level where our guidance counselors are going into the classroom and still teaching what bullying is and how that compares to conflict and how we can help students who are in that position if they are needing help. And then school and grade level assemblies have also been used in 4 through 12 to address a larger population of students.
Oh, you're good. Too many clicks. So along with educating our students, we're also working with our staff. We do this in several ways, most importantly during our back to school meetings, our weekly email memos, just kind of reiterating and reminding. We have monthly newsletters. We all have different forms of communication, but it's something that's kind of kept at the forefront. The protocols when someone is reporting or even bringing it up for an investigation, the protocols include documentation, so that way we get all the facts that staff members bringing to us, and then the administrators and the counselors follow up with that. And currently, something that we're excited about is we're working together as a K through 12 team to have some common protocols, common forms, so that way any administrator would know exactly which forms to use. The counselors also would have a commonality, and that I think would really help as we do have staff members that come between all 3 buildings, so that way they know these same protocols for every building.
So each of our schools do have protocol for receiving information from stakeholders, and this can come from a lot of different ways. It can come from students, which is probably most common. We also have parents that also can report, staff members and community members, excuse me, community members as well. Anytime there is a concern shared with the staff member, it is addressed then sent to the administrative team to be able to look at the investigation promptly and be able to decide from there what happens next.
Okay, then on to the investigation and reporting. This is where we're really doing a lot of detective work. We were joking the other day that Mrs. Holmes might as well just get her trench coat and go out as she's investigating all of these things. So the administrator gathers the information by speaking with students and any of the adults involved. If camera footage or other technology sources, email, those types of things, if that's available, it may be reviewed if it kind of goes along with the situation. Parents of students directly involved, so either the bullier or the bullyee, they are contacted as well. So parents are notified. Student statements are gathered, either oral or written, depending on the age of the student. And then during the investigation, the administrators continually go back to looking at that legal definition of bullying. Is this bullying or is this conflict? We find that far more often we are dealing with cases of conflict because bullying really is that almost a repeated offense, always going back to that same victim. If bullying is identified, all required documentation is sent to the IDOE. Parents are notified and corrective actions are taken place, which we'll carry on next. And then if it's determined that it's conflict rather than bullying, then we start looking at our disciplinary measures that are listed out in our student code of conduct.
When a student is verified as being a bullying situation, if we have a bullying situation that's verified, then administrators are communicating with parents of both the student who is the bully as well as the student or students who have been bullied. School counselor is involved as well to meet individually with the students that are involved in the situation. We sometimes can adjust schedules to be able to help in the situation, separating the students, giving distance. Examples of this could be during a lunch period, like alternate lunch periods. Staff are made aware of the situation as well and the expectations that they need to follow along with us moving forward. And documentation is recorded so that we have that for future needs. Yes.
What if the bullying happens on this, off campus?
So those are some of the things that we've been working with as well. Luckily, I don't have that at K3. Maybe later. And I know as far as the cell phones, I know Margaret and you've kind of worked with a couple different situations like that. If you want to share.
So cell phones are tricky, quite honestly, and it's difficult because the phone belongs to someone else. It is locked, and we don't have the right to just go through it. If it is affecting the school and the student day, we do, in our level, we do work with parents. I have never found a parent to not be cooperative in helping us in that situation if it means that we can get resolution to what's happening. The other thing that's challenging, though, is that the internet allows people to say they are anyone they want to be. And so someone creates an account and says they're Ron Schreiner and then sends something on, and it looks like it's coming from Ron Schreiner, but Ron Schreiner doesn't have an account and has no access to that. So a lot of times we spend a lot of time investigating and don't always get resolution because it's very difficult.
I think it's also the internet or cell phones, not always, but oftentimes they're going to end up being investigated by the police in addition to the school. Sometimes they'll have more of a ability to get to the bottom of some of that.
At what point do you contact the police in that investigation?
Well, it depends. I think I would say not initially, typically. I wouldn't know a percentage of times that we would contact police, but at what point? Sometimes never. And so, that's the difficulty of talking about it. There's so many different factors and variables and circumstances that surround somebody saying that that a bullying incident took place. So I think police involvement is just another thing, part of the arsenal of tools that you look to possibly look at. But I would also agree, parents, it's encouraging maybe to hear, parents are really generally very helpful on either side of bullying situations. We don't find ourselves hitting a brick wall because of parents typically.
Any other questions for our principals tonight? Mrs. Mumford?
So if I understand, if a student or parent wants to report bullying, they of course can tell a teacher or an administrator, but in the end, it's an administrator for each school that kind of is, who would be the contact person? Is that fair to understand?
It would definitely be the administrator would be oversee
Okay.
everything.
Well, counselors may, I mean,
Okay,
administrators aren't the only ones that are going to investigate it. Certain level of investigation might take place before administrator hears about it, either a teacher or counselor, or just in asking questions, sometimes that starts an investigation.
and at what point in the procedure are parents informed?
I know, well, like we had shared, once we kind of get through some of the initial investigation and figure out, hey, there is something here, that's when we would typically start involving parents and just letting them know, like, you know, we're working on the situation. And especially if it was a parent that called in to report something, of course, they would be involved at that point too.
But if a student came in the morning and reported it and had some concerns, it's not like by the end of the day that any parents would be informed that this has been happening at school necessarily.
I think that depends on if we can get through the investigation part of it by then.
Okay.
So we're looking at video footage if it's available, depending on the situation. We may need to talk to other students that maybe were near in the situation. And we may have to go into digital files, so we may have to ask our tech team to pull digital pieces. So depending on that, sometimes it takes a little longer to get to the point of having resolution by the end of the day.
So I guess my question is now coming from a parent point of view, I would want to know my child has either been accused of bullying or is being bullied before it got resolved, before you had all the answers. Like if my child, for whatever reason, was involved, I would be quite concerned if this was happening at 8 a.m. And in a good situation, I would be told at the end of the day. Unfortunately, there are children that don't go home and tell their parents at all. So why, I guess I'm trying to understand is why, I mean, I understand there's tons going on. You're trying to even see, is this true? You're trying to listen to both sides. But I guess my question is, why aren't parents informed a lot sooner, but saying it's not, we don't know what's going on. This has just been shared.
I would say that typically if it's going to take longer than the day, that's when parents would be informed. But if I can get a call and have all my information for the parent and not stress the parent before I even have all the facts, I think that's ideal. If I can get to the point of resolving it before the day is over, I think that's ideal. If it's taking longer and I know the child's going to go home, I want to be able to tell the parent what I know at that point before the child tells the parent something that confuses the parent.
Now, what about at the high school? Because I know there's been some issues with that where students, and cell phones and parents aren't being informed, over the past few years. Are there any steps or procedures of how quick parents are told, or are you also waiting until you get all the answers? Not all the answers, but trying to get some answers.
No, I would generally agree that it's tough to let something go overnight once you start investigating. So I don't have any case studies to share with you, but generally I would say a parent or parents are going to be told before the day is over.
Okay.
Because the kids are going home. And, if we have information to share, there's not a lot of benefit to anybody to let that simmer overnight and let the kid go home and talk about it. So I would generally believe that happens.
That
the same
administrators
day.
are contacting parents day of.
I would believe so.
Okay.
That would be ideal.
What about anonymous? Like, what would be a way? So I know there was a TikTok situation that had happened, that it was unknown who had led it, yet students were very aware of they thought they knew. What's a way when parents or students want to share information without having their name attached to it? Is there any steps to do something like that? What would be the proper way to do something where they know information, but this is very common, especially as the kids get older. They don't want parents or themselves to be connected with it, but students know a lot more than usually teachers, administrators, other parents. So is there any ways for anonymously sharing information?
Yeah, I don't know how information is shared anonymously myself, but I know it is shared, and we have had instances where we've received anonymous, hey, this has happened.
So how did you receive that?
I think a couple of examples I'm thinking of were on cell phones that parents have either sent screenshots or kids have made screenshots, that kind of a thing.
Like a printed version? Is that what
No, I mean actually on the phone. They'll come and show some dialogue that's taken place, that sort of thing.
We've had some dropped letters in our Dropbox in the front of our building. We also have, as we've been talking before about some forums and things, we're also working with our tech team to get a reporting on the website, so that can also be another option for parents. And I have also had letters that have just appeared in my mailbox. I didn't know where they came from. And so
I've seen that.
when that happens, we still investigate. It's a little tricky sometimes when you don't know who the other side is to hear their perspective and why it's being reported. But it is another option that people have used.
Helpful.
Oh, can I add one more thing
Please.
too? We also have sometimes people that will tell us who they are, and I want it to be known to everybody, and I think you guys are on the same page. We don't say, hey, Ron Schreiner, your child was accused of bullying by so-and-so. We never tell who reported it so that we can protect the people who are comfortable to come to us to talk about something serious.
I have a couple more questions, but I keep asking unless someone wants to ask. So I know it came up from a public comment previously that there had been some reports at the high school of bullying that had gone on, but yet at the IDOE reported 0 last year. What kind of steps, why, how were there no reports of bullying yet bullying going on?
Well, I think when you say reported bullying, I don't know if that falls into the realm of, doesn't meet the legal definition of bullying that we've shared that everybody's aware of, repeated acts. I mean, I think it's pretty commonplace in our culture to say bullying. I think it's become even more common. But again, we're operating by Indiana's definition of it, and not every conflict is bullying. In terms of your second part, I don't know. If there's an IDOE report, I guess I don't know, what that would be, or not sure where that is.
Because I understand at the beginning of the presentation, like if someone reports bullying, then and you investigate it, then it gets documented. And then if it meets the requirement of bullying, that documentation gets turned into the IDOE.
Yeah, it should be reported, yes.
So that would be the steps. So if the IDOE is saying 0 bullying, that means the school has said any reports of bullying were all found to be conflict, not bullying.
Or there could be an error,
The IDOE, that there was something.
maybe a reporting error, I don't know.
Okay.
And,
One or the other, I would say.
and disciplinary action can still be necessary at times. It just may not be called bullying, but it's still maybe necessary for us to be able to address it through discipline still.
What is there an appeal process? So let's say this has not happened to me. So I'll use my example. I come to you and I share my child's being bullying. Here's the circumstances. You investigate it and say it doesn't meet the requirements. So it's just conflict. But I say I disagree with you. It has been happening repeatedly. I feel like it meets it. Is there, do I have anything that I can do?
You have the right to disagree.
But nothing else. Who do I go to if I've met with the administration and the administration has said, I disagree with you, it's not bullying, and a parent feels like it is bullying and does meet all those steps?
If I were the
What
parent and
steps?
felt that it was serious enough that it qualifies as bullying as
Yes.
defined by the state of Indiana, I'd probably contact the police.
get the police involved is the
Absolutely.
way to do it?
Do you let the parent of the victim know what the disciplinary action has been with the perpetrator?
No.
We're not able to do that.
And I imagine that's frustrating for the family and the victim that they wouldn't know if that child had been disciplined, but
Almost
It's-
always.
part of their federal education privacy.
Yes.
Would they know if it qualified for bullying or was conflict? Like if the person that's reporting that their child, would they know, we do agree it was bullying, but of course, it's none of their, they're not involved in the follow.
And just to be clear, I'm fairly certain I know the answer to this, but if at any point in time you felt one of our students were in grave and immediate harm, you would intervene at that point.
Absolutely.
Okay, sorry, these are all questions that I've had a lot of high school students. What if it's a student-to-student situation, but it's not on school property? So that could either be after school or the weekends, or it could even be online, which is hard to say that happened in a school day. At what point do you get involved and what point do you say, turn it over to the police?
It just becomes, it's like your television, well, not television signal, but radio signals are more difficult to interpret the farther away you get from the station. So outside of school on the weekends, that should begin with the police. If the parents are, if their child says, this happened to me, well, that's a civil matter. If pieces of that get dragged back into school on Monday, then it can become a school matter if it's disruptive of the learning environment. That's the whole purpose for anything in the code of conduct, is your behavior is inhibiting others' ability to learn. You're not allowed to do that. And so if you have behaviors on a weekend, we know that police are contacted in those situations, and we may not know any more than that. We would know if it came into the schoolhouse.
Okay.
So it's kind of a mix.
Tough.
And that's one of those where the school might be investigating and also taking information from parents via the police.
Has the staff been trained in restorative justice techniques? Do we do any sort of training with and discuss in our schools restorative justice?
Well, I mean, I think we tried to give sort of a laundry list of ways that we communicate everything bullying to students and staff. And I didn't bring any particulars about that, but I know we are frequently sending emails or to particular staff members, or maybe the whole staff, at least in our building. I'm sure you probably do the same. We do a lot of reminding throughout the year. So I don't know.
But there's nothing like for parents to even get to review or see about things that are being shared with the students, or like, how are parents aware of what, techniques that are being used or things that are being taught? Or being trained, not taught, but trained.
So for us, it's through those guidance lessons that I shared, and we do tell parents when we're doing guidance lessons. We don't necessarily put the topics out to parents, but if a parent ever had any questions, I would encourage them to come in and we could talk about that and share the content that is shared through that lesson. And it's done annually, so we're wanting people to help us in that message as well. So if a parent is wanting to support that, I would love that.
Helpful. Okay, I think that was.
Any other members with questions? Dr. Ian?
Thank you for sharing the information. That's very helpful. And so there's a difference between conflicts and the bullying. And I wonder, if you don't have the number, that's okay. But I wonder in general, on every year, like how many conflicts are reported? Because according to the DOE, there's very few.
In kindergarten recess alone, there were probably 5. Conflict is very common, very common. It could be as simple as somebody pushed somebody down as they were chasing to get to the swing versus, arguing over, somebody stole somebody's pencil. So conflict is very common, just as it is we can walk outside and have conflict. So I think that's something that's pretty widespread. Just
I would say at our building, it's the same. We have a lot of conflict between kids and a lot of times it could be resolved just with an adult mediating with them to be able to talk about perspective and sharing, you know, this is how this person was feeling because we talked earlier individually, and this is how this person was feeling, and can we talk about how we can address it if you were ever to be in the same situation again. So we're trying to make it a teaching moment where they're learning something and walking away with more tools for the future when they are encountering situations like that again.
Yeah, conflict we have always with us. I just, I much prefer dealing with the kid conflict. It's when the teachers get into it with each other that I've got a problem. It sometimes happens.
So I guess between, so the conflict and the bully are not like dichotomous. They might be a continuum, right? So, you know, to at certain point they'll be cross the line. So then, so I wonder at what point the parents will be contacted, and so moving from conflict to bully, and so the parents will know.
So our families are still contacted when there's a conflict between another peer, and so they're aware along the way, whatever their child is needing to talk to us about regarding their role, if they had a specific role. So it shouldn't be a surprise if it's continually becoming a discussion point that we're calling the parent about, because at that point we've communicated every step of the way that there's been conflict continued, and we've also told the child steps to take to resolve it and to stop it. And we've put parameters in place to help with some of that before getting to the point of this. And so the parent's aware of those things along the way before it gets to that point.
You're talking about contact. Now, that doesn't always mean a phone call, depending on if it's fairly minor, something that's happened, like I saw at breakfast this morning, that probably is going to be documented in Skyward. So it's not always a call, but
But the parent gets emailed then.
Yeah. I mean, that's for the parent. They're certainly going to reach parents if it's just something we have to judge. It just depends on the situation.
And sometimes I would say conflict is so minor that it's a quick readdressing in the hallway. Like, you know, kids are walking and someone's coursing around and they're bumping into everyone because they're just not keeping to themselves. And then we're walking along, and a teacher could do this too, where the teacher reminds the child, you know, that they need to have their space and they need to make sure that they're not getting in other people's space. So those moments aren't called, they're not even documented formally, because it's a reteaching moment where we're in the moment and we can say something to stop the behavior.
Yeah, I understand with 3 kids at home.
Yes.
It happens all the time. So, thanks. But I just wondering about, you know, because it's a continuum. At some point, maybe it's serious enough, maybe not serious to be a bully, but it's a serious conflict. At that time, the parents will be notified, right?
Yes.
So not only the bully, but also some serious conflict.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Another question I have is for the student education. It's great you have like many ways, and I wonder typically when does those happen? Like in the elementary schools, maybe their homeroom teachers will implement that, or you have some sessions, and or then for the high school, probably the problem become more complicated because, you know, kids go to different classrooms. They don't have a homeroom, and also the bully can be in other format, for example, online. So I just wonder in general how that education happens. Do we have some special resources? I remember once I communicated with the West Lafayette PD and officer, they said actually they offer some like a online bully education, and so maybe I wonder whether we make a good use of those sources, or maybe we can if we haven't.
Our SRO does help with some of that as well, but our guidance lessons are taking place with our counselor in particular. But we want him to be involved as well, just because he's another presence in the building every day. So we want our kids to be able to know they can also go to him to report something. And that's just another adult that they can have as far as someone that they're comfortable to go to.
Okay, so the officer will visit different classrooms to share some.
So our officer has done a lot of connecting with kids, and there are some kids that we know he could positively influence too. And so he's been part of those connections with those kids too. And so at lunch, he might be sitting next to those students and asking how things are going, or if he sees a student sitting by themselves and maybe he's wondering, is there some reason for that? And so he may sit by that student just to talk and hear what's going on. Maybe the child may just want to sit alone. We have kids that are just choosing that because they want to have a quiet space, and that's okay. But it could also be that maybe their feelings are hurt about something and he can help with that. And so he's the presence that I think is also another person that keeps an eye on the kids for that purpose too.
Thank you. So for high school?
Yeah, we have seen that, maybe not to the extent you're saying it, where officers are with kids, especially in the dining court. One of the things we used to do, which wasn't very good, I don't know if it was a Safe Schools video or what it was, but I'm thinking back around the time of COVID, and we just felt like that as an educational piece kind of fell flat. So I actually have lately been talking with our Student Council Advisory Committee, who I have lunch with once a week or once a month. And they are like, they're always talking about wanting to do RDTV, which is something that's kind of come and gone here and there. And it's like a TV show, a news program that kids used to do. Just depends on the class of juniors and seniors primarily that make these things. But at any rate, they like to do an RDTV, but it's kind of complicated because it takes editing. So just recently I suggested to the kids on this committee that we have, a student council leadership, I wanted to see if they'd be interested in making a video where we could provide them an outline similar to what you have here. These components are actually good reminders. Actually, I might take some of these. And I would see what kind of interest in the spring the kids have in making a news program. A fun kind of thing, but very informative and explains all of these facets that we see here. So that's the kind of thing that, at our level at least, we think is pretty effective. And then we could show something like that with talking points for teachers and an activity period, which, we have every week on Wednesday mornings. So we're kind of looking at trying to find different ways to present information. And I just kind of tripped over that idea when the kids were talking about putting a show together. So we'll see what we'll talk about it more in the spring, see what their interest is. But this year is a good group of kids, I think, that might want to do that. So maybe they could make something for other grades too.
I think our students also teach each other about bullying and not bullying, I should say. And so last year we had a group of kids that on their own said, can we put signs up and have a kindness club? And I was like, absolutely, we can have a kindness club. Who wouldn't want that? And they were putting up Post-its and things, just very positive messages throughout the building, and signs that they created. And I just felt very proud of them. So our kids are also another piece of education that I don't want to forget, because they're teaching each other good things too.
Great, thank you. That all sounds great. And I think it's important to be proactive. So, yeah, thanks.
I think the video sounds pretty exciting, because by the time the kids are in high school, they've heard this every year before October 15th. So giving them a new
The idea is
way.
they might watch it because kids made it.
Yeah, I think that's exciting.
Yeah, they are so creative.
Okay. Thank you to our principals for being here tonight and preparing this. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the information.
Do you want me to take this back to our
Yes,
school?
that would be great.
I
Thank
thought
you.
that would be.
We'd like to move on to our next agenda item, that is the policy transition. And I invite forward
our legal counsel, Jessica Billingsley.
Good evening. I feel so lonely. They had 3 people up here. Just me by myself.
You don't have to fight for the middle chair though, so.
Spread out my arms. Good evening. So, Jesse Billingsley with Church Hill and Antrim. I'm here tonight to talk a little bit about the process of transitioning from your current policy provider to CCHA policies, get some feedback on that, and then answer any questions you may have. So, I'll describe what I'll call as the typical policy process. I have clients that have done vastly different things. I've just called this the typical. And obviously, any of it is up for discussion and customization to what will work best for this board and this district. So typically how it starts out is that CCHA presents a bundle, if you will, of recommended policies to administration. Work with administration to come up with recommended policies for the board to consider. Now, those recommendations may start with a policy committee or go directly to the board for first reading. And then the idea is that would happen sort of on a rolling basis so that once we get going at any given time in the process, there are policies or a bundle of policies on first reading and second reading. My office, and Roberta probably is the lucky one, will be in close contact keeping all of that operational logistics on track for you all. After that, or I guess a couple of caveats, the size of the bundle is a little bit experimental based upon capacity. Sometimes policies take a lot of work and discussion, and sometimes not so much, depending on the topic of the policy. Most boards, I'd say, go about 5 or 10 policies per meeting. And so obviously the speed of the process or the full transition can be dictated about how many policies go before the board at any given one time. During the process and then afterwards, CCHA will provide updates. We typically time those with the spring and fall to coincide with the state and federal legislature. But anytime in between a policy update is required, sometimes the Department of Education decides to issue a new interpretation, kind of out of the blue. And so we stay nimble with those policy updates and make sure your policies are as up to date as they need to be. That is a very broad overview, but I welcome any questions, comments at this time.
Mrs. Austin.
It's my understanding that we'll have a great deal fewer policies at the end of this process than we have now. And is there do you tie the new policies to our old policies so that we can retire the old policies and not have conflicting or redundant policies? Or do we just retire the whole thing, fly without a net for a little while, and then
Not the latter.
Yeah, you don't do that second thing, no.
So each of our recommended policies will come with the recommendation of the corresponding Neola policies or your current policies that can be rescinded, or in other words, that get replaced by that policy. So the board would have an opportunity to review those policies, see if there's anything that they want to maintain or work into the new policy. So yes, it's kind of an as we go through it, you would be adopting or approving new policies and rescinding old policies. So you're never without.
great, thank you.
Talk about advantages of your firm versus Neola.
Sure. I like talking about our advantages. So I think one advantage is streamlining the policies that Neola provides. They're a great service, but I think there's some bloat in their policies. One example, so you have currently a section for administration, for professional staff, and for support staff. And among those 3 sections are several policies that are just verbatim repeated in each section. And so there's no reason for that. Our approach is you have one section on personnel matters. And so if a community member, an employee, board member has questions about what the board's policy is, something staff or employee related, that's where they go. And there's no trying to figure out someone is a support staff member or a professional staff member or an administrator to figure out what policy applies to them, especially when most of the time those policies either overlap hugely or entirely. Second, we do approach with the philosophy of if the law requires the policy or if it's very important for the board to have a policy on the subject, we have a policy. And if not, our philosophy is not to have a policy on that topic. Typically, the policies you'll find in what you have where there's not a legal requirement to have that policy largely overlap or just repeat what the law already says. And so we see that as unnecessary and in some ways can add confusion. If there's a law change, you would then be required to change your policy versus if you don't have that policy that you're not required to have in the first place. And then there's just some condensing that's basically, for example, in your bylaws, there are lots of one-sentence policies. A lot of those have to do with your meetings. So we have a board meetings policy, where the vast majority of that is contained in one place. So as a member of the public, you don't have to know quorum or what somebody's role is at a meeting. You can just go, I have a question about board meetings, and this is where I go to find that answer. So those would be the advantages.
It's a searchable document online by keywords.
Yeah, I'd have to work with technology to make that come to fruition, but my understanding and the way my clients typically do it is it be a PDF that's searchable, assuming it's uploaded in that way, yes.
Any other questions, Dr. Yin?
So according to my understanding, currently we have more than 400 policy entries, and you will shrink them into below 100, right? So that's
Don't think it's below 100. I think it's between 100 and 200.
okay, yeah, okay, whatever the number is. So basically, during this transition, will we know which policies have been merged, which policies will be deleted?
Yes. So each policy that comes before you will specifically state this policy replaces your current policies and list the numbers so that you can see this policy will replace or take the place of these other policies. Yes.
And you will document the current policy, the whole Neola policy. We have worked for many decades. Not we, I mean, I'm fairly new, but many of the board members worked on this for decades, the current policy. So you will keep a copy of the current one, then create a new one, you said? Based on the current one.
So yes, we will take into consideration the current policies when drafting the recommended policies. Is that your question? Am I answering that?
Yeah, so you will document the current one. Another thing is, so the current policy is based on the Neola's template, I guess. Then once we switch to you, that means that we cannot use whatever we have in the current one, right? Because that's their copyright. Is it the case?
Yeah, that's correct. Neola owns, there's a little bit of distinction there. Yes, they have copyright interests in the policies that they have provided.
So we basically have to start from scratch. For all the policies we currently have.
Yes and no. So my firm has recommended policies that we essentially have created our own templates. And so those will be the basis, but then based upon what's already currently in policy and feedback from administration and the board will be revised and customized to the district.
I do need to offer one point of clarification. We did contract originally with Neola during my time on the board, so that'd be less than 10 years that we've had them. I don't recall the exact year that they came on. Prior to that, we did not have a company that we worked with, and we had only paper copies of kind of oddly worded policy. So just to be clear, you mentioned that we've had them for decades. We absolutely have not. We have had policies for decades, but we have not been working with Neola and their boilerplate text for that long. I would say, I'm going to guess, Tom, you were on that maybe 7 years ago? 7, maybe 8, yeah, years that we came on to Neola, redid all the policies. And this is, as you've described it, and I thank you for that, it's an opportunity for this board to review every policy as it exists now and as we would intend for it to exist in the future. So, but Neola doesn't say, okay, you need to throw away all of your policies now as of this date, we still have our policies on board, and then we work through this revision process.
And you'd also keep them for historical purposes. I mean, there may be reason to look back. Neola is not going to prohibit you from that. You've effectively purchased those from Neola at this point. Those are your possession, if that makes sense. So if there's ever a question of what was policy in 2021, you can go back and look at that Neola policy for it.
Look back, so that set still exists, or I
Yeah, we
wonder
would
the
still- we would keep
physical
it.
existence of that. You will keep that the current Neola one.
Yes,
So
the
we,
district-
whenever we want to go back to find anything, it's still there.
Yes, the district would maintain a copy of the past policies.
Oh, okay, okay, that would be helpful. Another thing is about the format, and I checked several examples the school district you served. I found at least the ones I checked all have PDF like files instead of the current searchable HTML. So those website ones, I wonder whether that's a feature of your policy or it's just their school's preference. They choose to use the PDF, because I personally found the PDF ones are hard to use. Those files just pump out and it's hard to search from the whole policy site. So I wonder.
So that is the school side. I don't program or
You
do anything.
provide content, they decide what kind of format they use to make those policies searchable. Oh,
Correct.
okay. So the quote you gave us for the cost only included the content. As for where to host those policy, those server or something, we need to figure out. We talk about a Word doc or something, right? The doc, Word doc server. So we still need to buy those. So in addition to.
Yep, that was the discussion. Yep, that we would purchase whatever was needed there, and Dr. Griner would make a recommendation to us about that.
Yeah, and so I have clients that do board docs. I have clients that host it on their own website. Either can work.
On the Word doc
Yes.
in the current format.
Yes.
We will just have a kind of shorter and more concise policy.
Yes.
Okay, and how long do you think the transition it will take for us to translate?
So again, it depends on how many policies the board can get through in a meeting. I would say best estimate a year.
Okay.
Okay, any other members with any questions? Lawrence?
Question regarding the cost. I say you were charged hourly rate for any update of the policy. Is there, so do you have the numbers for that rate?
It would just be it'd be the general rate that we charge the district. So right now that's $265 an hour for my work.
So there will be, so are we going to update the contract with you law firm regarding this kind of additional service, right? This
Yeah,
kind
we're
of
gonna
policy.
document, this is a flat fee, so it's gonna be separate engagement from the general counsel services I provide to the district.
Are we going to have some contract or some,
Yep, it's an engagement letter.
oh, okay, this kind of contract, right?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay, and also regarding the content, the example you showed me, is that the target things we are going to switch to there? The sample school district you share with us?
Yeah, I shared school district examples.
Yeah, so that will be something we will end up with, right?
Yes, I would assume that's a good illustration of what you will end up with.
Yeah, I compare with two of them. I find some of them, some key policies, I cannot find that on that school district. So I'm just wondering how we can handle that. For example, the education, like last meeting, we already talked about that. Say there's special educations, we have several policies cover a lot of details. But in that example you give us, there's only about 2 policies. One is general and there's another one is a little bit detailed. I think a lot of information is not covered. So I'm just wondering when we do these transitions, can we get our students with special need, they are kind of covered?
Yeah, so
Or maybe another way, what's the impact of this transition to our students?
yeah. So one, as I've described, you will have before you the policy we recommend and the policies that it will replace or could replace.
Okay,
And so if there's anything in those policies that I'm recommending be rescinded that you would prefer to maintain, that is the board's decision.
okay,
So there's that aspect of it. Special education in particular is such a nuanced area anyways. I would find it even in 8 policies probably hard to fully contain. And I think there are probably better avenues available both at the district level, building level, and even state Department of Education resources. All families that qualify or really have contact with their special education department are receiving a notice of procedural safeguards that outlines all of their rights and how to pursue those. There's helpful documents from the state. And so I think in some ways it may be better in this philosophy, so not necessarily dictating anything to the board, but that it may be better to sort of streamline the resources at the board level so that those other resources are more readily available or easier to find. But I do not dictate anything for the board.
I understand that because there are too many. But I mean, for me, I think we have different, philosophers, whatever you call. I think our current policy, several highlight of that Article 7, right, whatever you call that. I mean, most people came to the school bylaws just kind of like me, layman's, and they have students with special need, whatever. So I think this kind of policy is better. Just highlight several policy, highlight the basic things. Maybe it's better than, ask them to look at the 150-page fine print Article 7.
I certainly would not direct them to Article 7.
Yeah, that's just, I think, our policy, one purpose of our policy is everybody, layman's, they look at that and they can understand they're covered. Another example is I compare with the current our school policy with the policy samples, for example, the budgeting, school budgeting. And we have 4 policies regarding the budgeting. And I think something like physical planning, budget preparations, hearings, adoptions, and implementation. So we have 4 policies. And when I look at the sample school district, the policies you provide to us, there's 1 policy and 3 sentences. So I think I printed out. There's only 3 sentences. I think the budgeting is quite a serious business for our school corporation. That's 30-40 million. Public fund, and there's a lot of legal bindings requirement. I think when we transfer to there, are we going to kind of make that better policies like what we have right now, or you think that 3 sentence policy will be enough?
So, our firm stands behind that policy, that it's enough. And I think, I don't have it in front of me, but I suspect it references the school district will comply with state law.
Yeah, something like that.
And my guess is that most of what you described in the 4 Neola policies comes straight from what's dictated by state law. And so then the question, again, is just a philosophical one.
Okay, gotcha.
Of, do we need to rewrite what's in law in our policies, or do we just state we comply with law?
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I think that, again, personally, I think that's better than these 3 lines policy. Another question I have, when we first get the proposals from your law firm, and the information is confidential. So I'm just wondering, why you, this is pretty much just public business, why you prefer one make that confidential?
I think just trade secrets and interest in protecting our business.
Okay. And then later you decide to release that to public.
Well, when the board discusses it and it becomes public business, yeah.
Just to clarify, we will, as we work through this process, we will be working out every single policy. So there'll be two readings. We can discuss the specifics of any particular process of any particular policy as we work through the process. Our meeting here tonight and what we hope to get from Ms. Billingsley tonight is an understanding of what that process looks like.
Yeah.
So if you have any process-related questions, now would be the time to ask her those.
Okay.
But every policy will be here in this forum, so we'll hit that again. Okay. Anybody else, so Dr. Yoon, you've had questions. Does anybody who has not asked any questions yet have any questions? Mr. Schott, Mrs. Mumford, Mrs. Austin? Okay. Did you have one follow-up question, Dr. Yoon?
So earlier you mentioned that we can still keep the policy from Neola, so it's sort of like our property since we purchased them. Then in that case, can we just use that as a base and to figure out any redundancy or misstructure or whatever, and to make the new one rather than do it from scratch? Because given some of our policies are oversimplified in the.
I think the premise of your question is that we won't utilize your current policies in any format, but I would disagree with that. We will look to your current policies to inform the recommended policies we bring to you.
Yeah, then. In Mr. Wang's comparison, and what we have is more sophisticated than what we possibly will have. So the solution can be, why don't we start with what we have and then to merge what's necessary to be merged, delete whatever is redundant if the policy we have belongs to us. So why do we have to start from scratch?
Again, I'm not sure starting from scratch is the right way to describe it. And I just state that we will take into consideration your current policy when making the recommendation.
See, right now, for any simple policy entry, sometimes it even takes 2 reads to pass it. And then now we overhaul the whole policy, and let's say we come up with about 200, just now you mentioned. That's a lot of work. I mean, I wonder whether it's necessary. Why don't we just make revisions rather than start from the scratch, basically?
So I think to some extent that was the previous discussion, but I also, because that is the approach that we take to policy, is that you do not need, for example, 3 policies that say the exact same thing in 3 different places in your policy in your booklet. And so there's no need to have those extra policies. And I don't disagree with you, it's a lot of work.
In the end, I think you'll find it a more user-friendly document. So like in my previous district, for example, even with Neola, they would come to us and the board would decide, we don't want to adopt that. It is the law, and this is the policy where we don't feel like it needs to be adopted because we understand it. We're going to follow the law. That's not the case in every policy, but there will be times where Church Hill and Antrim or Jesse will recommend to us that consideration, and then you as a board ultimately will decide if you're going to do that or not. But and Jesse has spoken throughout the process that ultimately the board will make that decision. But I think throughout the process, it'll make more sense, and there'll be times where the board says, you know what, we hear what you're saying, we're not going to adopt that policy, and we see the resources you're providing, and that makes more sense.
Okay, so anyway, I hope just during the process and it's clear and transparent that we know exactly what we dumped and what we will have and what will be merged. So from the current one to the new one, because I don't want to lose something important, basically.
Yeah, so as I said, every policy that comes before you will have a clear, really, usually in comment form, just this policy will allow you to rescind these policies. And it parse out the number of the policies so you can review that policy and consider whether you really as a board want to rescind it or not.
And she will continue to take the board through first reading and second reading. We'll talk with administrators, we'll talk with directors. Then she's going to come and she's going to talk through it in first reading. If I assume
Yeah,
you
if the
need to
board
go back
desires
and work through it again, you'd work through it again. And I don't know that this would be the case, but if you felt necessary, one could possibly go even to a third reading maybe.
Yeah, and
Okay.
it could be sent back to first reading. However you want to approach that, absolutely.
So transparency will be very important, as you suggest, Dr. Yan.
Okay, and then that's the question I have is, so for this process, because we have a lot of cautious people here, and it may take a long time because we have a lot of policies to create and to revise, whatever you call it. And it will take a long time. And I just want to make sure we only pay the flat fee rather than pay by hours.
Correct.
Okay, so that's helpful because probably you can see it take us time to discuss things.
I will also say, though, that it is important that we as a board come prepared to meetings. That when the packet materials are provided to us, the old policy, the recommended policy, that we all are very open with one another about what workload we can reasonably handle. As Ms. Billingsley indicated, some boards might choose to go ahead with 5 policies a month in first reading and 5 in second reading, and some might go 10 and 10 or some variation of that. Having been through this process before, it's a lot of reading and a lot of work. And so I think we all have to be very honest about the time that we can invest in this. And we need to make sure that we are coming to meetings with the material read and questions asked and ready to go and say, no, we're not ready on this one, or yes, we are ready on that one. So it's not, it's exciting. It's exciting to have the opportunity to work through this and have a bit of a clean slate, let our community see our policies and streamline them in a way that will make sense to them, or a little more sense, but it also is a lot of work. And I want to make sure everyone on the board knows that pacing is going to be very important. As you said, as you started with us tonight, pacing will be very important. Are there any other follow-up questions? I believe we've gone a full round at this point. Dr. Yin, you've had a lot of questions. Is this one about the process? I want to let you have your questions, but I also, we have to keep our meeting moving as well.
It's just a lot of things. But if you say we do 5 per meeting and 1 year, we can only finish 60.
Some of them will resolve more than, some will be faster than that. Some will be slower. Yeah.
That means 3 years.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. We'll have to kind of, I would imagine, I don't know, you have not said this to me, but based on my previous experience with it, it will be, are we ready to go on these in the next meeting, or does anybody need more time? And then if they need more time, then we have to pause on some of those. So it's a somewhat fluid process, I would describe it. Has that been your experience as well?
Very fluid, yeah.
Yeah.
And there may be, come spring when there are new legislative mandates, there may be some of those in your bundles versus, the regularly scheduled to make sure you comply with newly enacted laws. So.
Anybody else, anything? Thank you for being here this evening. We are going to take a 5-minute restroom break. It's currently 7:36. We will reconvene
Thank you, Mrs.
at
Billingsley. Appreciate
7:49.
it.
Thank you. We are back from break. So we have a couple of different things connected here. This next one, so the superintendent and the board officers met to review in particular this policy 2520 in preparation to bring it for the first reading. We voted and agreed in the last meeting that we were going to reenact this at Member Wong's request. Just to be clear, it is completely appropriate for the superintendent and any combination of officers to meet and discuss anything. Also, to be clear, everything that was discussed, as you are about to hear, everything that was discussed was related to the quality of information being provided to all of the board in public meeting. That was presented to everyone in our November meeting in its entirety. So the policy information that was given was the current policy, the proposed policy redlined, and then the proposed policy as it would appear as proposed. And so we're going to step out of our meeting here briefly to do this policy reenactment. I elected to do this within the meeting as opposed to calling a separate meeting and then paying all the board members to come and hear this separate meeting. And so with that, we will start. We're officially reenacting. Do you recall the date of this?
I do.
I want to be specific here for the record. The date that we met with Dr. Greiner and Mrs. Roth and Amy and myself.
It was November, it's beginning of November. 2nd, yep, good job.
November 2nd in the morning, as I recall, earlier than Amy liked. We met and did this preparation for policy 2520.
And we decided that we were uncomfortable with trying to come up with exact quotes because there was no video or audio recorded. And so rather than trying to remember exactly what was said, we'll summarize what was said at each point. So first, pleasantries were exchanged. Roberta handed out the papers and explained the color coding.
At that point, I pointed out that the drafts had green additions and red deletions. I also pointed out that the packets had guidelines created by Church, Kittle, and Antrim.
And I asked about the difference between policies and guidelines.
And then I explained that the guidelines are for the administration to use and to follow. I explained also that patrons would start a complaint or concern process through talking with the librarian.
I agreed that that made sense.
I asked if the materials were available on the website as required by law.
And then I stated that I thought they were, and I asked Anna if she would verify that.
Three librarians who had confirmed that.
And then I stated that I thought, no, I'm sorry, Anna, you did. Okay. I asked Roberta then if she would remind me to check one more time with the librarians, just because we had that meeting. We didn't take notes, but we had verified that. And so Roberta reminded me, or agreed that she would remind me.
Right, and I asked you to confirm that the libraries has a physical copy as required by law.
And I responded that I would do that as well.
I pointed out that 9130 also talks about public complaints, but limits complaints to those residing in the district, and I was interested to understand why.
And then I responded that the policy 9130 is different because it talks about all materials and not just those in the library, which is under the new law.
And I looked at a difference in language between 9130 and the one we were looking at and wondered if having this complaint process would make it possible for people to take issue with textbooks as well.
I reiterated there's a separate process for complaints for textbook selection.
And at that point, we concluded that there was nothing else to discuss and continued to exchange pleasantries for 5 minutes or so before going home.
That ends the reenactment notes of our meeting. And we're going to move on to item 5, policy 2520, selection of instructional materials and equipment. So this is the second and final reading. I am going to turn it over here to Dr. Greiner, but I do want to acknowledge, and Ms. Billingsley has gone for the evening, but Mrs. Mumford raised a question about some other school corporations, and we did forward that on to legal and ask for her response. And this was it. So just to be clear, and I'm going to not call out these additional school corporations, but Mrs. Mumford forwarded, it looks like 7 other schools policies, or maybe not 7, 3? Does 3 sound right to you, Mrs. Mumford? I'm looking at your email, right? Your requests, some of them are kind of mixed in with our policies as well, but her response, and I just wanted to share that here. First, upon review, only Northmont appears to have the new library challenge process in its policy 9130. The 2 other school corporations' policies have processes for school community feedback regarding instructional materials, but those processes are not consistent with the new library process contemplated by IC 2026 5.5. So in other words, those other 2 school corporations don't contain the new library policy, since one was adopted in 2004 and the other was adopted in 2002. So in other words, of the 3 schools that you put forward, 2 of them had not yet updated to be in compliance with the new Indiana code, and one of them has, but it is, so the recommendation, and this is the part where it gets a little bit tricky because we're transitioning to this new process, right? And so she also is offering what her recommendation would be if moving forward. It doesn't really matter if the library material removal request procedure is policy or procedure. It will actually look the same either way. Her recommendation would be to have the library material removal request procedure be a standalone policy, either in the 2000 section program or the 9000 section relations. It doesn't make a lot of sense to add that 9130 policy because the present 9130 policy is significantly different than any of those other schools shown. So I know that it has been, let me look at the date on this. November 28th is when that message was sent with those other school corporations for comparison, but I wanted to at least let you know that we had sent that on to legal and we'd gotten some response from her on that. And her general response is, I don't want to summarize her unfairly, was that those aren't really representative comparison points for what we have proposed right now. So, but I didn't want you to think that I had failed to get that information. And so, Dr. Reiner, with that background information, I'll turn 2520 over to you. This, again, is our second reading, right?
Yes, it's since our first reading, we've had no questions other than Mrs. Mumford's original question. And I also understood Mrs. Billingsley to suggest that that procedure will be a part of it. And so, because we're going to be transitioning and to not go into a third reading, my recommendation is that the board accept the current policy as developed by Neola. But Mrs. Mumford, I will say that when she makes that process, when she moves it to the new policy, it will include the procedure that will actually become the policy, was the way I understood that what she was going to say. So rather than holding off, it's my recommendation that the board approve as is, knowing that the board's going to have an opportunity to develop it kind of the way you're talking about.
You say that much better than I did. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we're going to open the floor to any questions or comments.
We didn't have a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Schott, second by Mr. Marley. We're going to move on to questions and comments. Mrs. Mumford.
So at the previous board meeting, as stated in the minutes, there was a motion passed, and the motion says, we will have an open door meeting prior to the December regular meeting to discuss the content. This meeting, so I guess I'm unclear why we're voting on something. The majority voted to do that, and then you just get to decide. I don't have to follow what was voted on. So I'm confused on how that is allowed.
I appreciate your asking for that clarification. We did not agree that we would hold an open door meeting. What we agreed is that we would reenact the events of that meeting. Not really required by by anything to do that, but that was what we voted and agreed to do, was to reenact that meeting. So I had a couple of choices. One was to hold a separate meeting, which would have initiated additional pay to each member for a separate meeting. The other was to hold that as a separate meeting immediately prior to this meeting, which, as you know, we were not able to do because of an executive session that we had prior to this one. Or I chose to ask Dr. Greiner to embed it in the meeting. And my reason for doing that is so that it would make more sense, frankly, for everybody who was reviewing it. So everything related to 2520 was bundled together. And yes, it is, and it was important that that happened before we voted on 2520. So you'll notice we did that first thing and everybody had an opportunity to hear that. But absolutely, I asked Dr. Greiner to put it in this location on the agenda so that it would make sense, basically.
So in the minutes, it actually says, Mr. Wong made a motion to hold an open door meeting prior to the school board meeting. And his exact wording was to propose an open door meeting convened by the school board before the next board meeting. So the motion that was voted by the majority each time says that a meeting would be had before.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I did not recall it in that way, and I'd be happy to go back and listen to the video. It's a shame that you didn't raise this concern. Mr. Wong did raise the concern in an email and I responded to him, but I did not notice that you responded in any way about that before the meeting. So it feels a little bit like a gotcha when really we've been, as I explained to Mr. Wong, we're really just trying to put the information forward so that everybody on the board has the same thing. And I really understood this as, and the motion and discussion around this item was very much about reenacting it. So
It was a very good reenactment.
thank you.
was
Thank
very
you,
nice.
Mr. Schott.
So a second question that I have is in regards to the question that I had asked at the last meeting about including the additional information in 9130. The concern that I have is when this policy goes into place, if it gets voted tonight, tomorrow or next week or whenever Neola passes it, if a parent wants to know our school district's procedure for how to handle it, they'll go to this policy and they will read it, what to do, yet it actually doesn't ever share with them the steps or the procedures. And so until the new legal counsel comes forward and we pass 2 readings to change the whole thing, our community does not have access without possibly going to the website somewhere, going through some board docs to find something that I had shared at the previous one and been told that this would be considered, and it wasn't till tonight that it was shared what legal counsel recommended. So my concern is the legal counsel's recommendation was from a legal point of view, is the way I view it. We don't have to have this in the policy to meet legal requirements. But I'm coming forward saying from a community's point of view, it would be helpful to have it. And the 3 districts that I shared was not an intent to copy it word from word and look at the dates. It was intent, as I had shared the previous meeting, of sharing how that format would look at the 9130 because they're different. And so I am concerned that the recommendation that was shared was ignored. We were never given an opportunity in a work session, an open door meeting, to discuss this. So when this moves, if this is voted on the majority, our community does not have access or has very complicated access to the procedures.
Just to be clear, no members requested a work session from me this month.
I've asked for a work session. I would like to have a work session every month, and I've said that since the day I started, so.
I did
there's
not
never a
receive
time.
any communication from you, from any member. No member communicated with me requesting a work session for the month of December.
So I'll put on official record, I think it's appropriate to have a work session before every school board meeting to review the packet, as most school districts has, and that's never been accepted. And so I don't see a purpose of emailing and then getting the responses that I get after I ask questions.
We are off topic a little bit here, but I want to be sure and answer this. When you have requested work sessions, when any member requests a work session, the board chair's immediate request has to be on what topic? And what topic specifically would you like to talk about? The whole board packet is not an acceptable agenda item for any meeting. So there have been requests, we've been through this. What agenda would you like to have? What topics are you interested in information on? What would you like to discuss? People have to actually prepare materials for this and be prepared to answer questions in a work session. So that is, again, this is a monthly conversation where any board member who's interested in a work session needs to communicate with the board chair. I would like to have a work session to discuss agenda items proposed 1, 5, and 7. Okay, without any communication to the board chair, that work session is not necessarily going to be scheduled. They are listed as needed. And so if somebody does not make a case for what is needed, I'm completely fine having a work session every single month. But we can't just call an arbitrary meeting and not have any focus to it. That's not reasonable for the people who work to prepare. So at least that's my position as board chair, and that is my decision to make then at this point in time. The question, though, we want to get back on item 2520, and I apologize for taking us off of that item. We have to review 2520. As I understand it, we have a legal obligation to comply with Indiana code by January 1. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Perhaps if the board were to decide to vote to approve the policy, I can go back and immediately discuss with Jesse, Mrs. Billingsley, that'll be one of the first policies that we bring right back to the board to address concerns of board members.
No, I think that makes sense, but at this point, we have to have a policy in place by January to be in compliance with Indiana law. And so it's unfortunate, ideally, to all members, ideally, when we have a policy that's put on our agenda, if you have information that you would like to share with the rest of the board regarding that policy, you would provide that information to the rest of the board. Unfortunately, we held our meeting in the beginning of November and we got your information, Mrs. Mumford, on November 28th.
All information that I emailed was shared publicly at the meeting in November. So at the first reading, everything that I brought up tonight was the exact same information that I shared at the first meeting.
I don't recall receiving, well, neither here nor there. You and I can disagree on that, what was shared and what was not. But what we need to know right now is if anyone has any questions regarding this particular policy, if we're going to stay in compliance with Indiana law and pass it as recommended on second reading, with Dr. Greiners just giving us the assurance that this will hit an early review in the next round. Are there any other questions related to that this evening? Okay. If we could please go ahead with the vote then. All of those in favor of approving policy 2520 as recommended in the board packet, please indicate with a show of hands. Please note that carries 7-0, Mrs. Julian. Thank you, Dr. Reiner, for fast tracking any additional revisions to that.
I will get right on that. And you're welcome.
Okay, moving on to item number 6, the personnel report.
It's my recommendation that the board vote to approve the personnel report as presented.
Thank you. Could I entertain a motion, please?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Austin.
Second.
Second by Mr. Marley. Any questions about the personnel packet today? Okay. All those in favor of approving the personnel report, please indicate with a show of hands. The motion carries 7-0, Mrs. Julian. Moving on to item 7, the survey report. Survey results. This is information only from Mrs. Raw.
So last year, we started the annual tradition of the board administrative retreat to set priorities. And those are priorities that give us a direction for the year and help us come to some common focus, because there are many things that can pull us in many directions throughout the year. And this year is no different. So this is the second year we did this. And to provide a little bit of background, that is working through a process in which everyone has the opportunity to present their ideas and people get the opportunity to discuss. So those are the that was the process in short for establishing some district priorities. This first slide shows what those priorities were. So that was the step one of the process that we put in place last year. And now we're going to talk about the next step, which is gathering feedback from staff and community. So staff and community were invited to participate in a survey. We followed the same process as we did the year before, where we asked staff and community to rank the importance of a particular priority from their own perspective. And we also provided open-ended responses as well, realizing that people might have responses from a variety of areas. So on that next slide, you can see this is the information that we received. We received 150 responses, and this was from community and staff combined. And you can see the different roles of the people from whom we received responses. Most of our responses came from people who identify as parents or guardians of current WLCSC students. It was possible for people to check different boxes. So you could be a community member and a parent or guardian. Now, you could see yourself from a variety of ways. We didn't dictate that you had to be one or the other. And then we're going to dive into the different areas, the priority areas. So academics, of the 150 responses, you can see right there how that was ranked. And I'm going to go into a summary a little bit later. The next slide is whole child. You can see where that ranked for importance. Facilities was our next one. Then you can continue and you can see finances. And then the final slide here, you can see communication. So those were the 5 different priorities. Sorry, I'm not counting correctly. Those were the different priority areas. And then we asked a few questions related to each of these. So you can see on the next slide, there was a particular question about curricular materials review and adoption. This had come up previously. That's curious to know what involvement what parents were looking for, what the community was looking for, as well as what teachers are looking for. So you can see the question and how that was posed to families and to our staff members. We had 73 responses, so these were not required. With the ranking, you were required to answer. With these, you were not required to answer. And you can see the responses. Most people were interested. They wanted materials, textbooks and curricular materials that meet the needs of all students, have a base in research and evidence, are supported by and useful to teachers, and interesting to students, and unbiased and inclusive. Our next question was about a pilot 4-year-old preschool class. You can see the question there, and there were 50 responses. And the responses ranged from yes, but, and the yes, but were really focusing on, yes, I think it's a great idea, but it wouldn't necessarily be useful to me right now. My children have aged out. Or if it's this particular set of circumstances, it might be useful to me. The no responses were largely on no because my children have aged out. So people were looking from 2 different perspectives. Yes, it would have been useful, or no, it's not useful, but it would have been useful. And then the overall kind of trend was there is interest in having and promoting early learning as a community benefit. So people didn't necessarily say that a preschool 4-year-old class would be the way, but that putting interest and putting investment in early learning was something most people believed would be important. Our next question focused on the equity and engagement specialist position. This was one of those district priorities as well, as was the pilot, the preschool, looking at how to do some preschool things. This, as part of the district priority, we were tasked with finding metrics to measure this position, making this position more quantifiable. And so we provided a description that we'd developed over some time of this position, where it had gone from a diversity, equity, and engagement to equity and engagement. And we had added some things to it. There's the IDOE equity, family-friendly schools rubric that we've proposed to add to it, and some other things based upon board response, based upon principal and teacher responses. So you can see there were 44 responses, and this one, people clearly kind of stood in 2 camps. 77% of those 44 people responding were pretty supportive of the position and saw that it would benefit teachers and students. 23% were not as supportive, and they were concerned that the money could be spent in a different way. Those were the largest kind of camps. Based upon feedback, narrative feedback as well, we added to the description overall. So you see the description that was presented as well as a new description for a job posting. We added an at-a-glance calendar. It's a unique position. It's a position that will look different from school to school. So based upon responses, we added some tasks that someone might be involved in on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, on a somewhat regular basis. We also added specific language. When we talked to teachers, there was interest in this position being in the classroom working with kids, similar to how Mrs. Saros explained guidance lessons. This might be a person who would go in and talk about how we respect one another, as an example. So we added specific language based upon that. And we also added, this was based upon some responses as well, the notion of belonging. Belonging is a concept that connects equity and engagement. So we wanted to use that language in there based upon those things. So that summarizes the information we received about that. And this was also shared previously, and we'll connect to this next agenda item when we're done with this one. So we'll look at the next slide after equity and engagement, district-wide communications. You can see here the question that was asked. We send out newsletters and updates, and we knew during the referendum that we had a lot of communication because we needed to get the word out. And we have heard incidentally, informally from people that they like the communication. So we wanted to continue to ask what forms of communication, things like that. We found out people really do want to know about events and activities, and they want to be able to see schedules and calendars. It's important to have a variety of communication channels. People said, I don't necessarily do Facebook. I don't necessarily do Twitter or X. I would read a newsletter. I may not read an email. So a variety of things is what people said. People want good news. They want to hear good news about students and staff. And the other things, they want to know about timely updates. What's going on? If it's something that's affecting if it's something that is going on at the school that's not necessarily good news about a student or staff member, but a new initiative, a fundraiser, things like that. They want to have access to timely updates on what's going on in schools in the district. We'll move to that next slide. And then this was any other comments, and these were the trends that came through on this one. This was open communication again. Student mental health is still a concern for some people. This was 35 responses. Encouragement, please continue seeking feedback. Please continue the open communication. And then specific suggestions, a variety of things on a variety of topics, which we share with them with principals or with teachers or with whomever would be connected to that particular topic. So you can see the overview here of responses. And then that next slide shows comparison from year to year. So last year was the first year that we did this, and we did receive more responses, 223. We dropped this year to 150. As I mentioned, we'd just come kind of out of the referendum, so people probably had a lot more maybe mixed up in things or hearing about things. I don't know, that's just speculation on my part. And then the priorities as they were ranked. Academics last year was the highest priority, and it remains the highest priority this year. Facilities was ranked the lowest priority last year, and it remains the lowest for this year. Finances remained steady. Surprisingly enough, it was completely unchanged. And then academics, while it remained the highest priority, it decreased a little bit in the number of people ranking it as highest or essential priority. And the whole child decreased actually 18.2%, a little bit more. And then communication saw a little bit of an uptick with an increase of 5.6%, and facilities saw a little bit of an uptick as well. So we just wanted to provide that overview. And again, all of the information that comes from this is helpful in carrying out these priorities. The equity and engagement one is the next on the list. The feedback we received goes right into that. The communication, the website redevelopment, the feedback we receive goes right into that. So thank you to the 150 people that took the time to do that. That's nothing against the other, thousands of people who did not. But we do want people's feedback and we do want to hear from them. And this is just a quick and easy way to send it out. I will say from year to year, we kept the surveys open for about the same length of time. The one last year did come a little bit earlier in the year than this particular one. That would be because of the referendum. And so there wasn't much difference other than the timing. And hopefully as this becomes an annual practice, people will better understand that it's an opportunity and that we welcome and we actually want the feedback. That way we can learn from it and help us move forward in better decisions. Any questions?
Could I ask you, Mrs. Ross? I'm doing the math here and looking at who responded. It's roughly 4% of our parents participated in this. And
Teachers too.
It would be teachers or parents, yes.
okay, so just
Right.
looking at the parent piece, it was 100, so that put us about 4%. Looking at everybody who responded, it's about 6%, which isn't quite right because there's loans and other
Yeah.
things on here. Where would you, that seems very low to me. Where would you ideally, I mean, I know that 100% is not what we're hoping for here, but what makes the data valid when only 4% of people who are actively engaged in our schools right now are responding to this?
I don't know about the validity, but what I do know is that we receive feedback and we use that feedback and it's helpful and it's considered. And when that feedback is kind of matches with what we're hearing incidentally, you know, maybe the teacher, for an example, Mrs. X didn't respond, but in speaking with Mrs. X, we've heard her, we've talked with principals or even board members have brought forth concerns or ideas that we've heard before. So valid from a, would I make a decision? Absolutely, based upon the data we have here, probably not. I don't know that any person involved in polling or any kind would. Mr. Lifto, I doubt that he would make any recommendations based upon this, but it does give us a general barometer, a general temperature check. And as we continue to do this from year to year to kind of understand where people are, I do hope that more and more people will want to be involved and kind of submit some feedback. And if not, that's okay. But it's just one more way to reach out to people and better understand where their thoughts are. Some people pick up the phone and give you a phone call, other people don't. And so this is one thing directly in an inbox that can get us some information.
Thank you for that. Any other questions for Mrs. Roth? Dr. Yu?
Thank you very much for sharing the information. And also, in the first place, thank you so much for seeking the community feedback. I think that's very helpful for people to have an outlet to share their feedback. And I have some questions. One is, I wonder whether there will be any separate report for different schools, because I guess maybe for different schools, they have different priorities. For example, some schools probably did better in communication than others. Some may need a more, improvement there. And so another is how, so I remember last year we have a lot of specific feedback in the open-ended section, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we have the same thing this year. And
It was, I believe, 35 responses in the open-ended feedback section.
Okay, so
35.
Okay, so there may be some specific suggestions.
They were largely focused on continue to promote mental health support for students. And then the other one was really continue seeking feedback, continue with the open communication. The others were very specific to maybe a particular item, and then that information gets shared with the school or the director or whomever would be specifically interested in that.
Okay, so for those specific suggestions, and do those administrators have access to them?
Yeah,
for example,
we share that information.
Okay, yeah, because it'd be helpful to address those issues. Then people will feel, it's helpful to share those input. If they just give the opportunity to share input, but they don't see any changes, improvement, then they will be less motivated to do so.
And that is the hard part with the survey. You've always got response bias.
Yeah.
And then the other part of it is, ideally, someone with a problem reaches out to someone to help them solve that problem. But if it's in a survey, it's more difficult to have that. So ideally, someone would reach out, but we still share the issue or the concern so that it's not ignored.
Thank you. So I remember last time we got a copy of those open-ended responses. Can we still have
Yeah, we can do
this
that.
year? So we kind of, because we also, as a board member, I would also like to see what people's concerns.
And I forgotten that, but thank you.
Yeah,
It's a good
thank you.
reminder.
Okay, any other questions for Mrs. Roth? Or Mr. Wong?
I have a quick question. I shared the concern has Ms. Wade regarding the participants. So is there any way we can maybe encourage more people's participate? We really want to hear what they think about.
I like it. That I don't know. We do put it out. We send it directly to families via Skyward. So there's an email in the inbox of the parents who have their email address, any email address listed. We put it out on Facebook. We put it out on Twitter. We put it out there. So increasing the response rate, like I do hope that the more we do it, it kind of becomes the annual tradition and that people know that it will roll around. I do think next year we do want to do it a little bit earlier. The referendum kind of pushed everything a little time-wise, either earlier or after. But I think if we continue to do it at the same time and it's the same format, we stuck with the same format this year. That way we're not confusing any. It looked very familiar to those who had done it before.
Did we send out a follow-up reminder?
I don't recall.
We could try that too.
Yeah, we could do that.
We could try a follow-up reminder to see if that
Yeah.
increases in the future.
Last years we got 200 people participate. For those feedbacks, we have specifically addressed those things, or
Not necessarily everything, but it would be.
big categories, some
Yeah.
big issue, top things.
We distribute the information. That way we can make sure everybody's aware.
We have some actions, and during last year specifically addressed those concerns, requests.
Oh, with last year's survey?
I'm
I'm
saying
sorry,
last
I
year.
misunderstood. We did review the information from last year, yes.
We have some kind of response actions specifically for those.
I think we reviewed the priorities from last year.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's already coded into the kind of our priority things. Okay, thank you.
Any members who have not spoken yet have any desire to speak on this matter, ask any follow-up questions? I really appreciate your taking the time to do this, Mrs. Roth, and I know it's a big effort, and it is good to get community feedback. It'd be nice to get a little broader sampling, so we'll hope for the best.
And we'll be thankful for the
For
150
the,
who
yep,
did
we'll be
respond.
thankful for the 150 who
Yep.
did it. I intentionally don't do it because I feel like I already get to say it here, and so
Yeah,
I don't do it, but
no
maybe I
shade
should.
on anyone who does not participate.
Right, exactly. All right, I'd like to move on to the next item, item 9, in the Wonderland lease, and Mrs. Kronk.
Number 8.
Oh, I'm
equity-
sorry.
yeah.
I even have a check mark next to it, so I don't forget. I'm so terribly sorry. Yes, equity engagement number 8, Mrs. Roth, this is one we know we're going to have some conversation about here this evening, so please go ahead.
So this was the, as shared previously in the presentation I gave, this was a question that was directly on there where we solicited feedback, and there were the 2 camps, and that information was shared, I believe, 2 Fridays ago. And this was one of the district priorities that was established, I believe, back in August to insert those quantifiable measures, which we did through data points, but also through the IDOE Family Friendly Schools rubric, which brought the engagement portion into it. So we redesigned the position and we redeveloped the position. And based upon the feedback, you see the job description you have before you. When we first started looking at redesigning it, a timeline was shared that we would post in November. We're a little behind, and that's neither here nor there. Again, probably the referendum threw us off a little bit, but now we're in December, and we've gathered feedback from school staff. We've gathered feedback from principals who work more closely with this position. We've also gathered feedback from this board and put time and research into looking at different examples, and some people have done some great jobs of making suggestions and whatnot. So now you have before you a description, a job description, and at this point, because it is a priority, we are simply asking, do you want to move forward and post that job description or not?
Thank you. And so this is a motion item. Just to clarify, this is the 2-page document that we have. First page is the job description, and the second page, if you didn't see it, is the position calendar at a glance. So it talks about specifically what would happen and the frequency with which they would imagine it would happen. So with that, I will entertain a motion. Moved by Mr. Wong. Second by Mr. Marley. Wow. Okay. I know that we had some folks with questions on this one. Please keep in mind, everyone will get a chance to ask questions first round, and then we'll see where we are. Mr. Wong.
A quick question. Yeah, I appreciate that there's job descriptions and with frequency so clear layout. So I really appreciate that. One quick question. I think there's so-called family-friendly destinations. So I think that's very good. I look at that requirement matrix, and they will get more parents and community involvement. And I'm wondering how much of this position holders' time will be work on that destinations.
I think that would depend upon the skill set of the person involved. We've had clear communication from the teachers who participated in the survey and clear communication from principals that they do want this person to do lessons on respect or on, understanding that we're all different, those kinds of things. So that's where that comes into play. It might be one lesson in this first grade class on this day, one lesson in that first grade class on another day. But then the family-friendly schools, when you look at that, that's some meetings where you're gathering input from people. That's where you're sending out surveys and hoping to collect things from families. That's where you're attending a parent council meeting. So I think it's difficult to say, because it is a new position. I think it's difficult to say exactly what that divide would be. That position at a glance calendar, because it is something that would be new, was kind of a rough idea of, yeah, you're going to spend some time. And if I'm looking at data, discipline data from a school, I'm probably going to spend my afternoon looking at it. So that could be an afternoon for one person, and it may be an afternoon every 2 months. I really can't say that it would be 50-50 or 60-40 or where it would be. I don't think it would deviate too much from the 60-40, and I think that's what we would tell an applicant as well. You wouldn't be able to, put anything to the side. The position has priorities and functions that you are responsible for completing. And so to say to someone, you've got to spend half your day doing this, the idea would be, you need to make sure that we get the designation or that we progress toward the designation, as opposed to you have to spend half your day doing X amount of work towards this designation. But we do know that there are some clear commitments. Yeah, you need to be in classrooms. You need to be, if a teacher has communicated an issue with students that can't get along, and feels that it would be helpful for everyone to understand that we may all celebrate this time of year in different ways, that could be a lesson where that person would go in and do it. So that would be the immediate priority. Does that help?
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. Yeah, just a follow-up question. My understanding, this position is not really admin, right? Admin position.
No,
It's kind of,
it doesn't supervise anyone. It's really kind of the equivalent of a support position, kind of like our mental health counselor, working with teachers, working with students, providing, ideas to principals, whatnot.
okay. But I mean, when he or she to carry out her duties to try to realize this kind of family-friendly school destination, so how much resource or authorities, how much cost from our school point of view, or maybe something when you carry out, I need such resource and we don't have it, or something like that. mean, any,
Yeah, so so this is very similar to the mental health position, the counselor that we just hired and the position that existed previously. So this is where we started part of the conversation before we even went down the path of the family-friendly schools designation. We said to our principals, would you find this helpful? Do you believe it's important? Would your staff support this? Would your staff want to? And the answer was yes. So it's that's where we started the conversation, because as a principal, you have to support those people. It is very defeating to be doing something in a school and for no one to care about it. So we wanted to hear from principals, and then we wanted to hear from staff too. Is this important to you? So part of the whole process of finding out what to do was gaining buy-in at the same time. And so that's kind of that give and take. And honestly, the authority is, the principal is the one who says yes or no, but this is where you bring everybody together to say, hey, we believe in this. And then it's an easy decision for the principal to say yes. The principal wants to support that.
okay. But in terms of cost, it won't be that much, right? Just
The cost
other
of the
than this-
position,
Other than, no, when we're seeking the family-friendly.
yeah, no, all
Other
of,
than this position, pretty much,
Yeah.
they're not really need a lot of resource to.
no, the IDOE provides all of the resources, and it's a consistent rubric. It's a consistent process. They provide the surveys, they collect the feedback. So that work is done, which is pretty tremendous, because we did want that quantifiable kind of set of things that this is what the job is.
Thank you, appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you for answer. It's really.
Okay, anybody else? Dr. Yin?
And thank you. I agree with Mr. Wang regarding the description of the job. It's very thorough and comprehensive. And I wonder, so this position, so who will be the evaluator of this after we hire this person? And
So because it's a district-wide position, the person works with me and kind of, but the person, so I evaluate. I would do the end of the year evaluation, but I ask principals how, I gauge principals as the people who are responding for their building. And when this position was the DEI position, Mrs. Falk did it at the end of the year. Mrs. Falk, myself, and a principal, we all met together to talk about goals for the next year, goals for the previous year, and how things had gone. So I'm the person who completes the form, but we're gathering input from principals as their school representatives of work accomplished and goals and how that position, the whole idea is the position supports the work of the school, so how that position can continue to support the work. And it becomes even easier with the quantifiable IDOE family-friendly schools rubric. Did we make progress on that? Where did we get to? What do we need?
yeah, I think that would be really helpful to have the quantifiable and indicators, including that survey. And also, I think there will be some specific indicator, for example, the number of students who,
Yes.
a percentage of students who take AP. And in our school district, some of the kids took more than 10 AP exams, but some didn't take any.
Yeah.
And so also the absence information, discipline information, all those can be indicators for the success of as a way to evaluate this person.
Yeah. And then that person can bring ideas and resources on specific topics as well. So the person really is kind of looking very specifically at how do we better engage students, how do we better engage staff, and then also the equity piece.
Thank you.
Anybody else with questions about this job? Okay, so just to be clear, the vote that you are asking of us tonight is if we would like to vote to authorize this revised position and the posting of this position for hire. Is that correct? Okay, so be clear, everybody, that is what we are voting on here tonight. All of those who would like to vote to affirm the posting, the adjusted position and the posting, please indicate with a show of hands. Mrs. Julian, that motion carries 7-0.
Now we'll move on to item 9 and the Wonderland lease. And Mrs. Cronk.
Okay, I will try to get through all this without coughing too much. I apologize. Wonderland Education Incorporated has shown an interest in leasing classroom space at Happy Hollow to house equipment and supplies and to run workshops from that space. Wonderland provides experiential learning activities where kids can learn through engagement. Students from both within our district and outside our district participate in their programs. So you have a proposed lease in your board packets outlining the agreement to lease the space for the next year. Please approve that lease agreement as submitted.
Okay, take a motion, please. Moved by Mr. Schott, second by Mr. Wong. Questions for Mrs. Cronk about the Wonderland lease? Dr. Yin?
And so they are currently hosted in the Israel Temple of Israel. And so they will completely move here?
So they initially reached out and they desired to be with us in some way, shape, or form because of the restrictions at the temple, not being able to host classes on a Friday or a Saturday, not necessarily being able to keep materials there. So they were really looking for a place where they could kind of have a more continuous presence. I can't say, because I'm not them, that they wouldn't do things with the temple still, but they were looking for us to kind of be that presence.
Thank you. It takes a team.
Yeah, they reached out to me, and then when they said we'd like to lease,
Then it came to me.
it takes the team. Yeah.
They offer a lot of very interesting educational enrichment programs, and it sounds like a very good after-school program for many kids. And so I guess for this sense, because from the economic perspective, the rent is super low, probably won't cover the utility we spend.
We're basically
right?
covering utilities, basically.
Yeah, so basically that's a way for us to support them and also support our kids to add more educational. Yeah,
We
so
recognize
it's
it
just
as a
like
win.
the $1 baseball field. I
More
consider.
partnership for our families and communities.
Right. So that's why, the rent is.
And
almost
operationally
nothing.
speaking, they've been really responsive operationally speaking. And he's met with me a couple times and this is approved. He'll come and get the keys on Wednesday and we'll take a little walk over here. So
And you probably don't have that information, but I wonder before, when these hosted in the temple, kids can, from the villas, can just walk over it. And now if they move here, and how do they solve the transportation problem?
There probably wouldn't be the walking simply because of the distance, but we didn't talk about that because I know that that's something kind of set up separately, but they didn't seem to think it would be an issue because I asked the same thing. I said, are you walking? But they seem pretty confident. And then I think that they're going to start their programs a little bit later as well, which would allow time for parents to move
transport kids.
Yeah. And I can't guarantee anything because we create the space and we create the open arms for the relationship to happen. And we're thrilled that they recognize that the majority of kids are our students and that they're part of the community, but they decide ultimately those things.
So for the wellness center after school program, and we provide a bus and they pay for the drivers, right? So for this one, I wonder.
That wasn't discussed. They seemed to think that it could work out.
Okay, because I kind of wonder about the accessibility issue, and because when that Wonderland is close to Willis, and the kids, no matter whether or not they have the transportation, they can go attend it. But if it's farther away, and for those who don't have parents who can drive them around,
So if I could interject here, I believe Mrs. Delaney may have a little more information she could share with us.
So right now, because Wonderland just finished their session, we only had about 6 students walking over. And just in talking with the parent that's been picking those students up, those parents said that they could easily transport their child here. So they did take that into consideration.
okay, awesome. That's
Thank you
great.
for that additional information, Mrs. Delaney. Okay, any other questions for Mrs. Roth?
Texted Danny, and they're moving everything here.
I do have one question for you. Will there be custodial services in this building? Because some of the bathrooms and things have needed a little.
So as part of our lease, we do do some upkeep to the restrooms. Like I've seen one of our custodians come over here and do some maintenance on the bathrooms. I don't think it's an everyday thing, but they do come over periodically. I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly how often they do that. So.
I was just concerned, I know when we increase the number of small
And they'll
people
be
with
right next door.
dirty fingers,
Yeah.
that bathrooms are,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. I'll make sure that Larry knows that.
Yeah,
So.
are they also aware, like all of our other renters, that the air conditioning and
I've
things are?
had that conversation. with
Okay,
him,
good.
yes,
All right,
yes.
good.
I
As long
said
as,
the building is as is, so.
okay, thank you. I wanted to make sure that was just covered with them, as you went through. Any other questions? Mr. Wong?
My understanding is their Wonderland, they have the class for all community kids. It's not only for Mount Spring. Okay. That's good for us. Kind of this building is kind of local community owned. Kind of, and we use that for the local people. So that's good. It's good for our schools. Good way. So that's good. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mrs. Cronk or Mrs. Roth?
He confirmed that the parents are going to drive them. Many of them already do. So we're all covered.
Okay. All right, if we're done with questions, if we could please take a vote. All those who would like to vote to approve the Wonderland lease proposal, please indicate with a show of hands. That motion carries 7-0. Mrs. Julian, we're going to move on to item 10, property insurance renewal. Mrs. Cronk.
I just get all the exciting stuff, don't I?
You do,
Yeah,
you really
yeah.
do. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of good. You're sharing good news.
Yeah, I am sharing good news. Yeah, it's actually
like
pretty
it.
good news.
Yeah.
Representatives from Henriette Group began the process of going out to quote for our property, casualty, liability, and workers' compensation insurance for the 24 calendar year back in August. And they were kind of negotiating up until the last minute on the phone last week when I last talked to them. So they did a lot of work for us this year. Lots of forms to fill out, lots of time. It was fun. The industry as a whole has seen an uptick in premiums due to increasing property values. You've seen that with your houses. That's happening everywhere. So Henriette's recommending renewing our property casualty liability insurance with Astra, who we currently have, through Great American at a total package cost of $183,074, which is only a 3.73% increase from the 23 premium, even though those property values have gone up. So this increase is mostly due to the increase in property, equipment, and auto insurance premiums. I've seen a lot of increases in auto insurance premiums over like the last 5 years, so that's pretty standard. We're recommending that we stay with accident fund for another year for workers' compensation. It was a little bit higher than another quote, but switching back and forth to workers' compensation insurance, it takes a lot of work and a lot of time. And so the differential was not enough for me to warrant changing, especially if we stay with them longer. We will have a good experience rating with them, and they've been great to work with for the past year. So that premium cost would be $56,905 for 24, which is 11.6% higher, and that's mainly due to our increasing salaries and wages that we've approved for the past year or so. Like I said, we continue to have a low experience modification driven by our claims history with them, and we have a great working relationship with Accident Fund. So we would like to continue that relationship, please. And then lastly, Henriette recommends switching to Evolve Lloyd's of London. I know that's a weird name, but they are a great company to work with for our cybersecurity insurance in 2024. Our rate will actually be 25% less than 2023 at $15,100 for the year. The decrease is due in part to the hard work of our IT department. So thank you, Brandon, for all of your hard work this past year. They put a number of network safeguards in place that have helped us decrease that premium, along with decreasing premiums across the industry as well. So that's good news. So please approve the insurance recommendations for 24 as submitted. Once the recommendation is approved, Henriette can begin working on finalizing those 24 contracts for me.
Great, thank you, Mrs. Cronk. Could I take a motion, please?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Marley, second by Mr. Wong. Questions for Mrs. Cronk?
Insurance is so exciting.
Go ahead, Mr. Wong.
Regarding
If I can answer it, hopefully.
regarding the cyber insurance, cybersecurity insurance.
Yeah.
So my understanding, we switched to a new insurance provider, right? The walls.
Yes. So thankfully, nothing has happened to us with cybersecurity, so there's really nothing for us to do with that switch.
Okay.
Lloyd's of London, if I could just give a little bit of information, I've known a couple of their school corporations that actually had cybersecurity incidents, and they were wonderful to work with. Not that we ever want a cybersecurity incident, but they have a really good, I guess I would say, experience rating in this state. And a lot of people that they were very responsive when something happened. So
And am I correct that one of the reasons we didn't have as many choices before was because we needed to put some.
we had to put some safeguards in
that our
place. Yes.
tech team did do for us, and now we
Yes.
had more options.
Yeah. Last year was a really bad year for cybersecurity for everybody. Rates went, there had been a lot of incidents within the past couple of years that caused premiums to go really, really high. And for whatever reason, this past year, things have calmed down. So our premiums are lower again across the state. But we had been with Evolve apparently a long time ago, and they really wanted us back. So they gave a really good quote.
Thank you. And we have insurance kind of consultant, right?
Yes.
The com-
So Henriette
they
is
can
our,
pick,
Henriette is
pick
our
the-
consultant. Yes.
Okay, so we
they
pay
do all the
them something
legwork
like
for us to find out.
20,000 per year, right?
Yes, and
Kind-
so there, so
They
on
can
that,
code everything to
yes.
market.
So that table includes a fee that we actually pay Henriette to kind of be the
best deal we can-
medium. So if we have a claim, I contact Henriette, and they put me into contact with the appropriate people. Yeah.
Good. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Anybody else, any questions? Dr.
I'm just curious, so what's a cyber insurance, liability insurance cover? Let's say
So-
with,
So cybersecurity insurance, if say a hacker gets into our system and takes everything and gives us a ransom. They say, okay, we have all of your data, we have your payroll information, we have all of this. We're not going to give it back unless you pay us $500,000. Cybersecurity insurance kicks in. They come in, they shut down stuff. They work with the IT department. They'll contact the authorities, and it's this really big involved process where they try to mitigate what happens with something like that. Hopefully we have enough safeguards in place that we're not ever going to have a problem like that. But those experts, I've heard stories, like Dr. Greiner and I have heard stories when we go to conferences of this happening to people, and they get the system back up and running within 3 days. It's kind of amazing. So,
so they
Or
not,
months.
or
so they not only, so they help deal with the trouble, not only just pay us some money for the cost due to this.
sometimes they pay the ransom, sometimes they do not pay the ransom. So, I mean, it depends on like our backups of whatever they're able to save and things like that. So, we also have other safeguards in play, like with our financial accounting software. We have safeguards in place with our financial accounting software and things like that. So, like I said, it's all a process, and this is like that last thing. Like we have property insurance in case of a tornado. We have cybersecurity insurance in case of a hacker.
Yeah,
So,
thank you.
yeah.
Because this, you
Yeah.
know, is something.
It's scary to think about. Like, I don't want that to ever happen. But like Lloyd's of London, it has a really good reputation. So that makes me feel somewhat good. So
When we, back in the day, originally voted to get cyber
get
liability
initially, yeah.
insurance, right?
Buys, we
Yeah.
have covered.
yeah.
Yeah.
We bought it because of these events that
Yep.
are happening nationally.
Yep.
And they were attacking public entities.
Yep.
like Schools and municipalities.
And then they said after a couple of years, oh, we won't attack schools and places like that. Yeah, they do. They still do. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? All right, those, we'll take a vote. All of those in favor of the property insurance renewal proposal presented by Mrs. Cronk, please indicate with a show of hands. That motion carries 7-0, Mrs. Julian. We're going to move on, still you with the fun stuff, Mrs. Cronk, to the accounts payable
Yeah, I'm not
finance
quite done yet.
update.
I'm getting ready to email Stacy at Henry. Not done yet. All right. Claims for the period of November 14th to December 6th total $2,988,191.69, including regular corporation expenses and the Wabash Valley Education Center expenses. Of this amount, $1,377,003.01 were paid towards wages, salaries, and benefits, and include the appreciation grant that was paid to all staff at the beginning of December. Moving on to our preliminary fund report for the month ending November 30th, the Education Fund has a balance of $4,076,671.74, and total funds on hand for the corporation are $18,999,057.57 overall funds. The fund report is preliminary as we are still working on closing the month of November at this time. And a reminder that federal grants are reimbursable grants, and they run in the negative until we receive reimbursement. What's going on in the office this month has proven to be busy already with notification of the appreciation grant from the state. We were able to pay all those stipends out very quickly on December 5th at the rate of $498 per person based upon their full-time equivalency status. We are moving into the last payroll of the calendar year right now. And then we will work on the Form 9 financial statements, we roll over to the 2024 approved budget and complete other required state and federal reports, including W-2s and 1099s. And Dr. Greiner and I are looking forward to attending the IASBO Finance Seminar on Thursday with Board Member Wong. He will get to join us and get to partake in all that nerdy knowledge that we get to learn about on Thursday. So please approve the accounts payable finance update as submitted.
Okay, take a motion, please. Moved by Mrs. Austin, second by Mr. Wong. Questions, comments? Okay, I'll just say, Mr. Wong, thank you for continuing to learn and go along to this, I'm sure, riveting presentation of board finance.
I find it interesting.
It is interesting. It is interesting.
And
I agree.
I sit in the front, so.
She does. I gotta warn you, Mr. Wong, she does.
Brace yourself.
She'll hold me right up there with her.
All right. Yeah. Okay, so all those in favor of approving the accounts payable finance update, please indicate with a show of hands. That motion carries 7-0. Mrs. Julian. Thank you. All right, so we're going to move on. This conversation has come up. Dr. Greiner and I had some back and forth with Mayor-elect Easter to kind of understand where the city was coming from on this issue. And so the city of West Lafayette and Mayor-elect Easter are considering or having a conversation at the city level to the extent legally possible with government partners, requesting a full restriction of transient and guest housing in R1 zones. So in the West Lafayette Community School Corporation Board of School Trustees, if we're aligned with that, regarding this issue, we would like to provide a statement in support of Mrs. Easter's recommendation. So this statement would express our concerns for families and children, providing them with access to the neighborhoods that are safe, accessible, multi-generational, and walkable as a priority. So really that is all that statement would say, as we're proposing it would say, is that it is a priority for us as a school corporation that all of the neighborhoods in our community remain safe, accessible, multi-generational, and walkable. That would be the content really of the proposed statement. And so with that, I'll kind of open the floor for some discussion. I'm not sure where everyone is with that, but we would like to be positioned to support the city's efforts on this and the impact that it has on our schools. So anybody, any thoughts, any comments, any interest in seeing this come out as a statement from the board? Mrs. Austin.
Are we going to specifically say anything about the Airbnb issue?
The intent is to not. It is to state in a positive and affirmative statement of what we want for our community in terms of what serves our schools the best. Without targeting any specific negativity, it would be coming forth with a positive statement.
And I've reached out to Mayor-elect Easter because we want to have that partnership that she obviously would want to. And so she kind of verbiage if the board is interested in doing something like this.
Well, what we know from Mayor-elect Easter is that this language would be received as support by the city, which is what we would hope to do.
We have access to what you're proposing, the language or whatever you're.
Right, absolutely, we would look at this in our January meeting. And so it was this tonight is just to have a conversation about any interest, if there's anything in particular you would like to see added to it, how you feel about the approach, if you want to see us go forward with the resolution. Is it just information tonight to get everybody's kind of feedback on what they'd like?
Would this be something that's shared with just trying to understand the transition from tonight to January? Like, is this something that like you'll, because I would love to have it sent to the board sooner than later so that I can have time to review it. And is it something that's shared with the community as well and get input from them? Or is this something that's strictly board and then we bring it there?
Well, so it would be, the process would be, if the board indicates tonight there's some general interest in this, is that a draft of it would be sent to the board. Board members have the opportunity to do so, it'd be like a board packet type of document. And so it would come as a draft resolution in the January meeting. And at that point, the board could vote on it and to pass the resolution, and they could promote or propose edits to it based on that resolution. So it would be basically tonight, what I just need to hear is, yes, we like this. We are in alignment on this issue. We would like to talk about doing this. And then from that point, it'll be drafted.
Helpful, thank you.
I think Dr. Yin had her hand up first there, Dr. Yin.
So yeah, I support that we issue a statement, but I wish it can be more explicit. And I went to one of those zoning meetings, and as a resident, and I spoke against the application to convert their houses to Airbnb, and I know a lot of community members against it. It's apparently given that the houses in our district are already so limited, and so many families cannot find the houses that to purchase, even though they want to send their kids to our schools. I feel this Airbnb trend totally make it even worse. So I hope we can make a more explicit and maybe not that hostile, not hostile, whatever, but somehow make it more explicit, because the one you just read, to me, I feel it's really weak. I don't know how people interpret that, and those Airbnb proposers may not understand it as a way that we are against it. So, but yeah, my plan is whenever possible, I will continue to go to those zoning meetings to speak against this Airbnb trend. Because again, I know so many families are so eager to find houses in the district, but they are renting them out. Those Airbnb people won't bring their kids to our schools for sure.
Thank you.
And that damage the neighborhoods as well.
Any other feedback based on this? Any other questions about it? Mr. Wong, you had your hand up. Did you have?
Just to clarify, so basically you will maybe, Dr. and you guys make a draft things, and then we will circulate around, and then maybe next meeting there will be kind of statement or something which show our position or standing regarding this. Okay.
Correct. Our desire would be to be in alignment with our city, right? To be in alignment and be supportive of our city. So that was really what initiated the conversation with Dr. Ryan and Mrs. Easter, was to kind of see what that support would feel like.
And we have a few community members that you've all seen, because I think our community members have included, or most of them have included the whole board.
Right.
And so that kind of prompted, I asked Mayor-elect Easter how she would feel, knowing that we want to keep a partnership going that is very solid, and knowing that they've come out speaking against it as well. And so I agree. Ultimately, it's the board. So I will be the facilitator of working with the board, and then working with Mayor-elect Easter, and making sure that you all feel like you're moving down the pathway of something that you would be comfortable endorsing, while also embracing the partnership that we so recognize, not only with the mayor, but with even Purdue. Because one of the first things I was most impressed with when first getting here was I immediately had meetings with President Daniels and Mayor Dennis, and then equally interested in continuing that partnership is Mayor-elect Easter. So I assume the board would want to make sure that the board is talking with the city to get to a point where you're all very comfortable so that that wonderful relationship that makes this city the great city that it is continues.
Did you go ahead, Mr.
Yeah,
Wong?
just, so basically, maybe sad issue. So for this issue, we talk about that's basically we got the email we got, basically we respond to their emails, right? I saw we have email connections, right?
From community members?
Yes.
Yes, we've had
That's
community
part of it.
members reach out
And then
and do,
regarding-
and as you saw my response to those community members, it
Yeah.
was, we understand what you're saying, we need to hold this until the referendum is passed, and now you're seeing us come forward. We are good to our word and following up on considering a resolution on this.
Yeah, that's my, I'm thinking about maybe if we get some feedback from community members through email, maybe we can put that on meetings to discuss. That's just I'm thinking maybe that's good way because we are kind of public service and then they pay us. So if I won't say everything, but something, if somebody send us emails, there may be some other people also have same concerns or comments. Maybe you can bring that to the meeting, kind of discussions, at least kind of we receive understand their concerns and well, here's what our response, something like that.
I hear what you're saying. I think some of the feedback that we receive from community members might not be appropriate for a meeting forum, and some like this one certainly is appropriate. I think we have to kind of make those decisions. It's interesting that you raised that issue because I think if we look back on email communications perhaps over the past year, for example, a number of those have found their way to board meetings, but they have not specifically cited the writer of the email. But they've come forward in some type of, if I think about some different events that we've been emailed about, they do find their way, which is what this has done. It's just found its way to a meeting.
But something like what I'm saying is not every email, just something like this. Pretty much a lot of people's got people impact. So highly impacted issues, maybe we can bring that to board members to discuss. That's just something I'm thinking. Maybe we can kind of respond the community's concerns or comments, something like that.
Anybody else, any questions or comments about this one? Okay. It sounds like then the board would be willing to consider a resolution at our next meeting, and so we'll get something out. Okay. All right, so we are going to move on now and information to the board. It is my role to remind you of what our end of the or beginning of the new year looks like. So as a reminder, on Monday, January the 8th, we have an executive session at 5:15. And then immediately following that, we have an organizational meeting at 6 p.m., followed by a regular meeting in the first order of, followed by the regular meeting. So that meeting is one every year that goes one right after the other. So this is my reminder to the full board at this first, the order of business of the organizational meeting is to elect and seat the board chair for 2024. And so how that happens is as the current board chair, will convene the meeting, and then we'll steer the nomination and election of the 2024 board chair. All of that happens here in the meeting, and then immediately after that, the newly elected board chair is seated and then proceeds to do the vice president and the secretary of the board. That has to happen, first order of business, and there's also some other things that are required to happen within that organizational meeting. So we're all familiar and aware of that. That agenda is set. Really, Dr. Greiner helps us substantially with that, along with legal counsel, to make sure that we hit everything that we are supposed to hit as a board in that first meeting. And then we're still going to have our full slate of regular meeting agenda items immediately to follow. So also, just to help keep the focus productive, and student-focused in general. I am just going to announce now that I do not intend to seek or accept a nomination to continue as chair. And so it has been my pleasure to do so for the past 2 years, but this will mark the end of it for me. And so I would encourage all members to really consider what will be best for our schools moving forward. And so I wanted to give you plenty of time to consider what your views might be on that. Other information that we'll move on to. Dr. Greiner, would you like to go first tonight?
Yeah, you made me go last
I
time.
did. That's why you get to
Thank
go first this time, right?
Okay, just a reminder that holiday break begins at the end of the day on Friday, December 22nd. It will be a full 2-week break, and school will resume on Monday, January the 8th. High school principal search is well underway. The first round of interviews for the high school principal search will be next week, starting Monday, December 18th through Thursday, December 21st. And the second round of interviews will be during the first week back from break, which will be the week of January 8th. I just want to take this opportunity as we bring closure to 2023 to thank each of you as board members. Your service is so much appreciated. I have no doubt it's a thankless job, and you guys are just well respected and appreciated by me. So I just wanted to say thank you in this meeting as we bring closure to 2022 and prepare to ring in 2024. We also have accomplished much this year, especially what we know was the most important task of that referendum renewal. And we tirelessly went through the process and saw just how committed our community is and our students and their learning opportunities. And so I'm very proud of the work that the board and our team have done together to meet the needs of our students. And I'm looking forward to working with all of you in 2024. Thank you, Mrs. Witt, for your service as board president. And you brought in a new superintendent. That probably wasn't easy. So I thank you for your patience with me. It's been an honor serving with you as well as the entire board. And I want to thank too members Marley and Austin for your service as officers this past year. And I'd just like to take an opportunity to say to the entire board, I wish you a happy holiday season. You're welcome.
I have some questions on the principal search. I know the community is very, interested, and this is very important to them. Can you share publicly applications? How many have you received? What are they looking like? What are kind of the status of applications?
We've received 15.
P, A through P.
Is it 14 or 15?
13.
There you go.
13, but there was a couple that came in that just didn't have the information we needed to continue, not complete.
Not complete.
And so, I think there were 2 of those. How many?
16
16.
candidates, some in more complete forms than others.
That's what I remembered. There were some that, So 13 candidates that we would look at and consider as we screen. And we've got experience and some that maybe don't. We've got a wide range of experiences, and all of that will be considered.
Typically, a principal search is usually January, February, March for a July start. This is early in searching, and also kind of a difficult time this week coming up with first round interviews being at the end of a semester, a very busy principal time with really limited applications that are complete, that have experience. My recommendation is that we open it up to continue through January. I was looking on Indeed. We have Zionsville and others that are opening up principal high school applications. And to be able to post on Indeed and extend this, and to me, it feels very rushed, like trying to get that. I appreciate that you're wanting to get the best of the best at the beginning instead of wait till other places hire. But being in the month of December, and talking to other places, it feels like this isn't when a lot are looking even and aware as much as when they come back in January during the typical principal market. So I think that this would allow us to have more applications and see, what we can bring in. And I don't see any negative of extending it and seeing what additional applications we can get.
If the board would like to discuss that, we would be open to that. This one's new to me. I'm not going to be upset if the board would like to discuss that. I will tell you that the donut area is very competitive.
The what?
The Indianapolis area is very competitive. The Hamilton County and Marion County.
Yes.
So to have that opportunity sooner than later, the longer you go, typically, as you suggested, they do start to
Get taken. Yeah.
Yes, and so it could limit the pool. My recommendation would be that we move forward for the reason that our team kind of discussed. But I hear what you're saying. If you have concern that you want to cast out further, I just know that the longer we go, the more opportunity that as you suggested, they might be.
I mean, the concern is we have limited applications that were even complete and limited applications that had much experience. And so unless, but we don't have a lot of access as board members. It was limited what we were shown.
Sure.
So, unless it's like, wow, we've had these phenomenal applications, we really don't need any more applications. To me, that would be a benefit of closing it now and rushing it more. But if it's more of like, let's see if we can get a few more and open it up to more, I think it would give it.
As I understood it,
I will tell you that
it
it's
is
not
open.
closed.
Yeah,
Yes, it's
it's
not.
still open. We received one today, correct? And the position is still posted until it is filled.
Is it posted on Indeed? Okay, that seemed limited. Anyways, I was just doing some regular job searches like principals, and not being a principal, I was seeing and asking around, and it seemed like Indeed was a popular place to post it. So, but even if it's open, if we've already completed first round interviews, to me is a message of we're not,
Typically, any employment position would remain open until it was filled. Generally speaking, that is what happens, is that it's open until it's filled. So that is not out of the norm for any hiring.
We posted it that way purposely too, that December 1 was the preferred, in other words, we were going to start looking to schedule interviews, but that it would remain open until the position is hired. And then we could go back and even still repost it if we didn't feel like that we had within the pool that we interviewed, if we weren't satisfied, we wouldn't necessarily have to settle.
Shocking that we only have 4 complete applications. And I think we should extend the deadline. When people see the current deadline, even if we say we will continue the search until the position is filled, normally people will assume actually we will stop considering additional applications. So I think for a school that rank in the top 300, and for such a wonderful community, we only got 4 complete applications. This is super shocking. I think we should extend the deadline.
Just to be clear, Dr. Yin, what was discussed in executive session is confidential, and you're disclosing that now in a public meeting. So
we talk about the numbers just now, the number of applications. And
right, but you're talking about the nature of the applications.
What's the nature?
You are describing the applications in terms of your view of their completeness. That is
We ask for documents.
Dr. Yin, I'm just giving you a reminder, okay, to just everybody at the table to please use some caution.
I want to keep it as a secret. I don't think it's appropriate.
We have to follow the process that is outlined. I want to remind every board member that Dr. Reiner is a professional. He has made wonderfully hiring decisions for our school corporation. There's no reason in my mind to question his ability to hire and to
I
follow.
didn't question Dr. Greiner's ability. I'm just saying.
Dr. Yin, I'm not going to,
enough.
I hear you. Thank you for sharing your opinion. I am now sharing my opinion. My opinion is that we have a recommendation from our superintendent on a timeline and a process I would like it to see us give him the confidence of continuing that timeline. But I appreciate the differing viewpoints of what that is. And I also just remind all members to consider what is confidential of what was discussed in executive session and what is open to discuss here tonight at the meeting. That is all. Are any members who have not yet spoken, do you have any comments to add to this? Mr. Shaw.
Not surprised by the number of applicants for the very reason that our speaker, who would want to come work in this environment. I think we're fortunate to have the applicants we have. We should proceed with the timing as we have. If we don't like any of them, we can reopen it, but this is not as great a job as we think right now. That's because of 7 of us, so.
Mrs. Austin, you had your hand up. Is there anything you wanted to say?
Agree with Mr. Shaw.
Mr. Marley.
The only thing I would add is this is actually up to our superintendent and his staff to make this decision as a courtesy and as an accommodation to open things up and include more opinions and input. He has taken this app, which he's done successfully before. I would suggest the same thing that's been suggested already. Allow our superintendent to continue on this path. Ultimately, this candidate will be brought before the full board. If we don't like what we see, we can act accordingly. There's opportunity to do that. So let's keep the process moving, please.
Okay, this is not an item on our agenda for a vote. Dr. Greiner, do you have any questions for the rest of us about the thought?
I didn't have any questions.
Okay, thank you. All right. Mr. Wong?
So make sure. So you say the timeline pretty much at the end of December will be the first round interview.
First
We
round
can
interviews
talk
would-
about that, right? And then the January will be the second round. So, but
We have
the
3
first
board
round,
members on the committee. We have teachers on the committee. So we have a wide, 3 board members. A wide range of stakeholder input throughout the process.
but for first round, the interview basically for it will be real person or it will be, I mean, if in case there's some out of town candidate, will go through the
Yes,
online.
they'll be here. There'll be a real
They
interview.
will come here, right, for the first round, right? First round interview. Okay. Another thing I'm trying to understand, so what's the peak seasons for the principals? Because in the academic area, each area have their seasons, the recruiting seasons. So for our principal recruitings, what's the seasons for the principal?
So right now, principals would typically not want to leave a school in the middle of the year and start in a new school in the middle of the year. And so principals would start to look now, especially in a corporation like ours or Zionsville that are very competitive in pay. But those top interested individuals, when there's a Zionsville or a West Lafayette, the pool will become more and more limited as far as experiences as time goes on, because they will have gone through the interview process and been selected. So as you go into March, April, May, the longer you go, the more opportunity that applicants have had to be hired by a school corporation that is posted.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. Appreciate
You're welcome.
Statewide, so there's more competition, so we'll start earlier to try to get people.
Did Kokomo just recently
Kokomo did
post and
a
hire?
position. They hired a mid-year position this evening.
Okay.
Today, this evening, what do you say?
Somebody left leaving at the end of this semester, so they hired somebody to start in January.
Oh,
You did a mid-year hire. Dr. Yin?
I think there's no need to rush. And so if we don't have the right candidates, and we can always have an interim. We have 4 other assistant associate principals, and we can have an interim while we are searching for the principal. because I think this is super important. I don't think we should rush. And also, as for the numbers, I don't think it's confidential. I remember when we searched for the superintendent, we announced those numbers every time. So I don't see it's.
Dr. Yin, let me just clarify. My reminder to you about executive session was related to your describing the number of resumes and your opinion about their relative completeness. That was the conversation that is held within executive session.
That's not my opinion. That's a fact.
Okay,
Please.
Mrs. Austin.
Let's get back to the superintendent and board reports so we can go home. It is 9:20. We've been here for 3 hours and 20 minutes. Actually, I'm sorry, 4. We've been here for 4 hours.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dr. Yin, regardless of whether or not you feel my comment applies to you, it was a comment directed to the full board as a reminder about executive session. Again, this is not an item to vote. Dr. Greiner has given us an update on the search so that it's available publicly. And we'll move on now to reports, starting with community, Mr. Shaw.
From the foundation, 35 alumni and friends gathered at Arnie's Restaurant in Indianapolis on November 29th for a reception. Remarks were shared by Brad Cohen, Dan Walbaum, John Speaker, and Wendy Ayler. It's a great response to that event. WLSCF partnered with Mrs. Sheffield and the counseling office to present a scholarship information night on December 4. Over 40 parents and students attended. It was very well received and will likely become an annual event. A special thank you to Karen McCullough, West Lafayette parent and director of Scholarship Stewardship and Development with Purdue for Life Foundation, for sharing her knowledge and expertise. Foundation hosted a watch party on December 10, yesterday, as Dr. Berwindy, class of 1978, received the Nobel Prize in Chemistry. And the Devil's Advocate alumni newsletter will be landing in mailboxes very soon. I like what Dr. Greiner said. Rachel, thanks for your 2 years of service as president. You already look 5 years younger. So.
I agree.
Okay, so we're going to move on next to curriculum, Dr. Yin. Or Glass, or any report that you might have tonight.
We met right before this meeting. We met once. We discussed to have a matrix for the activities, and so to make the community more informed for different schools, all the activities available for different schools. And for the park, and the ice rink is open. There will be a ice skating social on December 18th, free to the public. During the pre-council meeting on November 30th, the West Lafayette Wellness Center was renamed, announced that it will be renamed to John Dennis Wellness Center to honor Mayor Dennis' 16 years service to the city.
Thank you. Finance external, Brad, do you have anything tonight?
Let's see. Redevelopment Commission met November 15th, 2023, 8:30 a.m. Great crowd in attendance. Mayor-elect Aaron Easter announced that the pre-K study/survey is progressing nicely. Grant and Salisbury Street Improvement Project will not be done until after the first of the year. Don't hold your breath. Cason Park well underway, as you might have seen out on Cumberland Avenue. Jaeger Trail has started in front of CTS. It's progressing nicely. We now have approved a request for proposals for a comprehensive strategic plan. If you think you've seen progress in West Lafayette lately, you ain't seen nothing. We're going to have a plan that goes out 20 or 30 years. Big stuff. Lease agreement was signed on the caretaker's cottage. You may have seen that, top of Salisbury Street. And the library signed the lease. So it's in good hands now. And it'll be used for some historic significance and presentations within the caretaker's cottage. That's all I got.
Thank you, Brad. All right, we're going to move on to finance internal. Mr. Wong.
Yes, I don't have too much report regarding the financial things, but I have attended 3 training sessions, so I just quickly review that. The first, there's webinars regarding legislative action network, WLCSC trainings, so that's pretty good one. So they have introduced about Indian political landscape and how school board members to advocate public educations, what we can do, how to do it. There's some tips. So that's very good webinar, very good trainings. And I also attend the training, which is also webinar regarding the manager public comments. This there's the speaker is David Binker. So he's kind of veterans of public service, serving different school board, also some other board. So he has this kind of presentations about don't be afraid, have good attitude, and some best practice in his public service years. And one thing I think I kind of agree is the action. He talked about some actions after public comments, and they say you talk with people, mingle with people after public comments. Some people maybe don't like to say something publicly, so you can get a better understand what their issues. So can be intermediary between school and the community, and also to document the comments. And the next meetings, you can revisit those things for next meeting. So I understand we have some concerns about to document those public comments, but in this case, I kind of agree with them. We document the comments, and the next meeting, maybe we can talk about that. So I just double check, ask him, and he said you don't need to document a lot, just name and the key issues. So next time you can revisit. So that's some things for that meeting. And also attend December, so-called December school law seminar. So this is a whole day trainings, and which all many issues covered. Something like library book legislations, and how they talk about how to draft, like what they did, the policies regarding the remove books from library, that kind of things. And they also go through the 10 most controversial books, ask people to review that, and then they challenge you, say if you are board members and what you are going to decide. So that's very good training. And they also talk about the school student posts on social media. Like the bullying things, as we just talked, how the school regulate that. And there's another topic, is about overview of individual board members' liabilities. So they have some court case to review, see what possible liabilities for individual board members. And there's another seminar is talk about the ethic for the school attorney. That's from CCHA. They present. Basically, they explained their Indiana rule 1.13 regarding the professional conduct of a lawyer. So there's very good information. And they also talk about AI in the workplace. Because there's not too much regulations. So this is part of, if you're employer, you use AI for the hiring things, maybe you end up with some lawsuit or some open court case. If you are employee, use AI, there may be some issues. And they also talk about the misuse of AI for students. So that's very good session. So that's all my report. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on, internal systems, Mrs. Mumford.
That I serve on did not meet, and have met this last month, so I'll report.
Okay, Amy, Mrs. Austin.
Dr. Greiner and I attended a training from the Indiana Superintendents Association, had a good day down in Indianapolis, enjoyed getting some team building ideas, which we're going to try to implement next Christmas. I also listened to 2 webinars from ISBA, one about the legislative agenda and advocacy, and that was kind of a rehash of everything we did this fall, and another about public comments. And finally, my husband and I had a wonderful time at the holiday party, and I'd like to thank Mrs. Julian for all of her hard work in putting that together and taking good care of my annoying diet. And everything was wonderful. And I'd also like to thank you, Rachel, for your service to this community. Few people will ever truly know how much you've done and how much it has cost. And those of us who do will never forget your generosity and the bar that you've set for selfless community leadership.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Just a reminder to everybody, we have exec session on December the 19th at 6 p.m. Dang it, Amy. For personnel matters. We have a work session if needed, Friday, January 5th. As a reminder, we have that organizational meeting, an exec session, an organizational meeting, and a regular meeting on January 8th. All of that is happening back to back. And with that, I would take a motion to adjourn. Moved by Mr. Marley, second by Mr. Wong. All those in favor of adjournment, please indicate with a show of